Chapter 388. Murder isn't like long-distance running or riding a bike. There's no such thing as conserving energy. Unless the murderer is an experienced professional assassin who has killed countless people and is able to control his strength perfectly, as well as be mentally prepared for the target's various reactions. Otherwise, the murderer will definitely go all out and use all his strength to tighten his grip on the target until the victim completely loses resistance. Feng Bujue explained. Then, the murderer's palm will definitely have some cuts or contusions. He gestured with his own hand. The location of the injury should be around the edge of the palm, below the base of the little finger. Even if the steel wire was wrapped around the hand a few times in advance to increase the surface area of the palm, most of the force would still be absorbed by this part of the hand during the actual murder. Then doesn't that mean the case is solved? Schofield said excitedly. Forget about the secret chamber, Demuti. Hurry up and gather everyone in this villa and check their hands. Don't rush, detective. Feng Bujue interrupted him weakly. Don't forget the premise I mentioned. If protective measures aren't taken. He shrugged. As long as the murderer wears a pair of slightly thicker gloves, this problem can be solved. Also, if the gloves are long enough, the probability of the victim's hand and forearm being scratched will be greatly reduced. This basin of cold water instantly extinguished the excitement in Schofield and Demuti's eyes. But you're right, Feng Bujue said. We still have to check, but we have to be clear that even if there are no injuries on the hands, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone isn't the murderer. He added, also, as you can see, the victim lost a lot of blood, and his own hands were stained with a lot of blood. If the murderer wasn't wearing gloves, it's very likely that his or her hands were stained with blood, and he or she would have left bloody fingerprints everywhere when they escaped. Of course, although I don't think that's very likely, we can't rule out the possibility that the murderer washed his or her hands in the bathroom before escaping. Schofield nodded and said, well, then, in addition to the murder weapon, what we have to look out for now is a pair of bloody gloves. It's impossible to find them. Feng Bujue gave them another piece of bad news. What did you say? Schofield asked. Feng Bujue replied directly. After the murderer killed the people and set up the room as a secret room, the location was outside the window, that is, outside the villa. He or she only needs to walk a short distance and throw the weapon and gloves into the valley. Who would be able to find them? Schofield didn't dare to continue the conversation. As long as the detective in front of him opened his mouth, he would be able to point out a clue, but in less than 2 sentences, the clue would be cut off. Feng Bujue had already turned around and walked towards the door. When I was investigating the crime scene, I checked it very carefully. Other than the area around the body, the only blood stain I could find was the very faint blood stain on the windowsill. So, my speculation is as follows. At this point, he was already at the door of the room. He locked the door and continued. After the murderer killed the victim, he first wiped the murder weapon and wiped the blood off the thread as much as possible. Then, he put it aside for later use. Then, he took off her gloves, turned them inside out, and crumpled them into a ball. He put them aside for the time being. Then, the murderer came over and locked the door. Of course, I think there's a 70% chance that when the murderer killed the victim, the door was already locked. Brother Ju turned around and walked towards the window. After making sure that the door was locked from the inside, the murderer took the gloves and tied the steel thread to the window. Suddenly, Feng Bujue stopped in front of the window and looked troubled. Officers, which one of you knows how to tie a slipknot? His weakness of not being good at knitting was exposed again, although it didn't matter. What kind of slipknot do you want to tie? Demuti walked over and asked. What? There are actually many kinds of knots. Feng Bujue's expression was unprecedentedly blank, because the conversation had entered a blind spot for him. Yes. Demuti pushed his police cap away and scratched his hair. I have an uncle who is a sailor. When I was young, he taught me quite a lot of knots, such as the double knot, fisherman's knot, shrink knot, joint knot, figure-eight knot. At that moment, Brother Ju looked at him as if to say, "So, you are the legendary colonel who has already broken through the art of tying shoelaces." Anyway, Fong Bujue changed the topic. "Listen to me, and you should know what the knot is." The window of this guest room was a traditional flat window. In the middle of the left and right window leaves, there was a rake-shaped window latch. Fong Bujue pointed at the handle of one of the window latches. The murderer tied one end of the steel thread to this handle. Then, he or she went outside the room, closed the window on the other side, and inserted the window latch. Next, let the latch of this window remain horizontal and slowly close it from the outside. Oh, I understand now. When Demuti heard this, he already knew what Fong Bujue meant. He took the string from Brother Ju's hand and tied it to the window latch handle quickly. Then, he quickly went outside the window, held the other end of the steel thread in one hand, and slowly closed the window with the other. Then, he pulled the steel thread out from the window slit. "Yes, that's it," Fong Bujue said to Schofield, who was next to him. "Look, the position of the thread must be stuck in the lower edge of the window. That way, when the murderer pulled the thread, the window latch would turn down until it was properly inserted." Schofield understood. When the window latch is inserted, it will be in a vertical position. If the murderer continued to pull, the loop of the steel thread will fall off from the end of the latch handle. At that time, the knot will fall apart and the murderer will only need to pull the thread out. He pointed to the edge of the window. During this process, due to friction, the thread will leave a blood stain on the edge of the window. Yes, even though to prevent this plan from being exposed, the killer has already wiped away the blood stains on the murder weapon, but to not leave a trace behind is still difficult, Fong Bujue said. Normally, after killing someone, they would try to escape from the scene as soon as possible. As Brother Ju spoke, he opened the window, pulled Demuti, and helped him climb back into the room. Although the murderer in this case had a plan in advance, when it came to actually carrying it out, his mentality wouldn't be too different from that of a normal person. Fong Bujue moved away from the window and paced around the room. If he or she had prepared another steel wire to set up the trap, or if he or she had used the water in the bathroom to carefully clean the weapon after the murder, then perhaps it will be more difficult for us to solve this hidden room. Usually, no one would go to this extent, Schofield said. "Ha!" Fong Bujue laughed. This laugh was meaningful, and it made the two police officers' hair stand on end. Okay, the basic method of the murder is clear. Brother Ju stretched lazily and winked at the door. Now let us go and have a chat with the suspects of this case. Chapter 389. Just as Fong Bujue and the two police officers walked through the foyer and were about to meet up with the police officer in charge of questioning, the sound of a car came from outside the mansion. After the three of them heard the sound, they stopped and looked in the direction of the door. Schofield and Deng Puti were confused, but Fong Bujue was as calm as ever, as if a mountain was about to collapse before him. As mentioned before, Fong Bujue had done some research on the sound of footsteps. Therefore, when the visitor got out of the car, took out her keys and approached the door, Brother Ju already had a lot of speculations in his mind. He immediately said, "Female, between 20 and 30 years old, well-proportioned body, wearing boots at this moment. She looks a little anxious." Before he finished, the door opened. A 26 or 27-year-old blonde beauty appeared in front of the door. She was wearing a jacket and jeans, and a pair of leather boots on her feet. "Miss Nancy?" Fong Bujue asked tentatively. Yes. May I ask who you are?" Nancy glanced at the uniformed Dempsey. "What's the matter?" "Indeed, some terrible things have happened." Fong Bujue extended his hand and introduced the two people beside him. "This is Inspector Schofield from town, and this is Officer Demuti." The two police officers adjusted the brims of their hats and politely greeted the lady. My name is Fong Bujue, I'm a detective, Fong Bujue continued. Police, detective. Nancy looked worried. Fong Bujue said the word bad for 2 reasons. First, to prepare her mentally, and second, to test her. After seeing her reaction, Brother Ju said, I think it's more appropriate for your family to tell you this bad news. He turned sideways and gestured to the 2nd floor. They are in the study on the 2nd floor with another police officer. We can go there together. Nancy hesitated for a few seconds, then looked at Fong Bujue and the others. She didn't care that her luggage was still in the car and quickly walked to the 2nd floor. Fong Bujue and the other 2 also followed behind, but because Nancy was in a hurry, she quickly left the 3 men in the distance. Unbelievable, Demudi said. Mr. Fong, how do you know what the person outside the door looks like? And you even know her name? Listening to the sound of boots on the steps, the frequency of footsteps, the weight and other subtle characteristics, I can basically guess the gender, weight, and age of the visitor. Fong Bujue replied, as for the name. Because I already knew some of the Lovecraft family situation, I knew that Colston had a daughter who would also come to the villa. So, after seeing her, I inferred that she was Nancy based on the color of her hair, the outline of her face, age, dress, and temperament. Of course, even before the door was opened, I guessed that it was her. After all, this is a remote place, and there won't be many visitors. If it's a fast. He paused for a moment, almost saying the word, express delivery. Fortunately, he stopped in time and changed his words. If the family ordered goods from somewhere and asked the shop to send some necessities to their door regularly, then the person who came should be a strong man. It doesn't match the footsteps just now. Schofield looked at Brother Ju with admiration and praised. No wonder you're a famous detective. You can think of so many things in an instant. What is this NPC doing? Is he possessed by Xing Tai, the character in Detective D. Renjie? Fong Bujue complained in his mind. It doesn't seem wrong to change all your lines to Master Zheng's common sayings. For example, benevolent teacher is truly a godly person. What you mean is, there are no flaws. That makes sense. Benevolent teacher's words are extremely true. What did you think of? How did you think of it? And so on. After changing his title to Mr. Fong, saying it out loud would be enough. You seem to be useless, but in fact, you are an indispensable driving force in a detective movie. In this story, which only has 14 chapters, you are a nightmare. If you go on like this, in order to maintain my wise image, I will not be able to help but quickly reveal the truth. Fong Bujue finally couldn't help but whisper softly, no. If this continues, I can't hold on. It's imperative to be appropriately unreasonable. It doesn't matter if I'm crazy. Anyway, as long as the case is solved in the end, no one will say anything. What did you say, Mr. Fong? Schofield asked. No. Nothing. Fong Bujue changed the topic. I suddenly thought of an idea that can help us find the murderer more effectively. He waved his hand and motioned for Schofield and Demudi to come closer. The 2 police officers didn't think much of it and immediately walked a few steps closer to Brother Ju, ready to listen. My plan is... Fong Bujue lowered his voice and whispered between the 2 police officers. After a minute, he finished speaking. Schofield and Demudi straightened up and looked at each other, then looked at Fong Bujue. A few seconds later, Schofield said with a serious face, "This is a really good idea." "Oh? Really?" Fong Bujue didn't expect that Schofield would agree with his strange strategy so easily. "Actually, when I was a detective in the big city, I used to do this to those stubborn gangsters and drug dealers," Schofield said. "They are all old foxes, so I have to do something." He paused for a moment. "But the people in this villa are all famous people. I'm a detective in a small town, so it doesn't seem good to play this kind of trick on them." "But with a detective like you, it's much easier," Demudi said. We, the police, don't need to be responsible for what you say. That's great. It's a win-win situation. Feng Bujue smiled. As the three of them talked, they had already arrived at the door of the reception room on the second floor. Before they entered the room, they heard Nancy's surprised cry. "Oh, God! This can't be true." The latter half of her sentence was laced with sobs. "Don't be too sad, sister. No one wants to see this happen," Jack replied. At this time, Feng Bujue and the other two entered the room. Glancing around the room, they saw that on the sofa, the police officer in charge of the interrogation, Mark, was recording Mrs. Carroll's statement, while Mrs. Odetta was beside Carroll, comforting her softly. Not far away, on a chair, sat Colston, frowning deeply. He was talking to Dr. Powell, who was beside him. Barton was alone in the other corner of the room, looking restless. Jack was standing not far from the door, and Nancy was crying in his arms. "Mr. Police Officer, could you please come over for a moment?" Feng Bujue said to Mark. Mark turned his head and looked at Schofield's face first. Seeing that his superior nodded, he walked over and said to Brother Ju, "Is there anything I can do for you?" "Yes." Feng Bujue purposely made eye contact with everyone in the room, and then he purposely raised his voice to say, "Can I have a word with you?" Chapter 390. 20 minutes later, in the study, Feng Bujue was sitting behind the desk, casually flipping through the booklet that Officer Mark had used to record statements. Detective Schofield, on the other hand, was sitting on a chair next to the desk. The two of them had commandeered the room and were ready to interrogate the suspects one by one. Based on the confirmed criminal evidence and relevant information in this case, we can try to make a logical depiction and judgment of the perpetrator's criminal psychology. From collecting information to inductive analysis, and then to inferring the results, these three steps are the basic step. Specifically, we use the deduction method. Feng Bujue was explaining, showing off, the theory of criminal psychology to Schofield with great interest. A deduction method? I've heard of it before. Schofield finally understood the concept. He continued, "Is it a concept from the novel Sherlock Holmes?" "No, deduction method is just a saying. This word can have many meanings." Feng Bujue shook his head. "In this case, we don't need to use the deduction method of Sherlock Holmes, but the deduction method of the so-called criminal psychological profiling." What's that?" Schofield asked. "Inferring the psychological characteristics of the criminal, and then outlining some of his or her physiological characteristics, personality traits, daily habits, and so on, so as to reduce the number of suspects and narrow down the scope of suspects." Feng Bujue explained, "This isn't strictly a science, but it is a very advanced detective concept." He licked his lips. The deduction method in criminal psychological profiling is divided into two steps. The first step is to communicate with the suspect to obtain the main evidence. These evidence can be the elements of behavior, or the elements of criminal psychology. The second step is to start from the general principles of criminal psychology, evidence technology, investigation, and so on, associate the criminal behavior or criminal psychology with a specific suspect, and draw a portrait conclusion. Of course, there are more than 10 key points in the specific steps of the portrait, so I won't go into detail. I can't finish it in a short time. Anyway, I think, in 10 years, these courses will be included in the curriculum of the police academy. In the future, it will be the world of academics, and those who can write reports will be promoted faster. Thump thump. Just as Feng Bujue was getting further and further away from the topic, there was a knock on the door. Officer Deng Pudi stood outside the door and said, "Mrs. Carroll is here, sir." Schofield and Brother Ju looked at each other, and Brother Ju quickly nodded. Schofield then turned around and shouted, "Let her in." The door opened and Mrs. Carroll walked in. Her eyes were red and swollen, and her tears had yet to dry. More than half of the expensive makeup on her face had been wiped away by her handkerchief. Her face, which was not considered pretty, now looked even more haggard. "I'm sorry to disturb you at a time like this." When Fong Bujue spoke, Dempsey had already closed the door behind Caroline from outside the study. Carol replied, "It's okay. You're just doing your duty." Her voice was low and slightly hoarse, a side effect of crying for a long time. Please take a seat." Fong Bujue gestured to the seat opposite him. Schofield stepped forward and held the chair for the lady so that she could sit down. "Thank you," Carol said softly to the detective and sat down in the seat facing Fong Bujue. "I'll get straight to the point." As soon as she sat down, Fong Bujue said, "The murderer is someone in this villa, right between us." Carol was mentally prepared for this. No matter how sad she was, she could have guessed something so obvious. "Who is it?" Carol asked with a trembling voice. "I did think of some hypotheses," Fong Bujue said, "but before I'm completely sure, I want to hear your opinion first." "Me?" Carol was puzzled. "Yes," Fong Bujue said, "I want to ask you, who do you think the murderer is?" Carol's eyes flickered. She was obviously thinking about something, but she still replied, I don't know. Why are you asking me?" "Haha." Fong Bujue smiled. "Since you don't want to say, I'll explain my deduction." He leaned back in his chair and said in a relaxed tone, "I think the person who killed Dennis Lovecraft is you, Miss Carol." "What?" Carol was shocked and angry, and her voice rose unconsciously. "How dare you say that? I love my husband so much. My heart is about to break when he's dead, and you accuse me of being the murderer. According to your testimony." Fong Bujue wasn't affected by the other party's agitated attitude at all. He continued, "Before you opened the door was locked. After you opened the door and saw the body, you didn't even enter the room. You were so scared that you collapsed in the corridor." He shrugged. "But when we arrived at the scene, all the windows in the room were locked from the inside, and there was no other exit. Who else could the murderer be other than you, who had the key?" He deliberately made up a story. "I think you killed the person first, then locked the room. You went out to dispose of the murder weapon and wash the blood off your hands. Then, you came back and pretended to be the one who found the corpse so that you could clear your name. You're talking nonsense." Carol was so angry that she couldn't speak properly. "Why would I kill my husband? Motive? I think it's because of love." Fong Bujue raised the booklet in his hand and waved it gently. "According to Officer Mark's inquiry, you and Dennis didn't have a child, right?" "Yes. So what? Is that against the law?" Caroline countered with a question. "A couple in their 40s. The man's family was well off, and the woman's family was rich and powerful. Under the premise of no pressure in life, if the couple loved each other, why didn't they have children?" Fong Bujue murmured. "Although it's not illegal, it's very strange, don't you think so? This is our private matter," Carol said angrily. "Personal matters." "Ha!" Fong Bujue continued as if nothing had happened. "Then, as an outsider, I can't help but continue to make wild guesses. Your husband, does he love you as much as you love him? Does he have any other motives for marrying you? As you know, although the Lovecraft family is already considered rich in the eyes of ordinary people, compared to your family." Chapter 391. "Enough!" Carol shouted. "Please, stop slandering my dead husband." She gritted her teeth and replied, "It's not that we don't want children, it's just..." She choked. "The doctor said it's my problem." She paused, because that was all she could say. "Mr. Fong, Mr. Detective, I hope you can keep this a secret. If what I said here today appears in any media..." She choked on her sobs and continued, "Mr. Fong, Mr. Detective, I hope you can keep this a secret." "Understood, understood." Fong Bujue interrupted. "If this gets out, then the biggest tycoon in Asari will come after us. By then, Mr. Schofield will probably lose his job and pension. and I will probably be packed into a suitcase and thrown into the Mediterranean Sea. Sweat broke out on Schofield's forehead. He quickly put on a serious face and said, "I swear on my honor as a police officer and my personal integrity, Ma'am, your words will not be leaked." Fong Bujue continued calmly, "In short, since there is such a reason, then I think I have misunderstood you." He casually retracted his words and said to Carol, "So far, everything I've said is all speculation, not accusations. I hope you don't mind." "I think it's hard for ordinary people not to mind what you say," Carol replied. "You have every reason to be angry. I understand." Fong Bujue said, "If I were you, I would be thinking something like Dennis should really leave this B** starred by the side of the road." Carol didn't respond, but her expression already admitted that she had been seen through. "Let's go back to the first question." Fong Bujue smiled. "You see, you've overturned my reasoning. I'm at my wits' end now. Unless you tell me a suspect with a potential motive, it'll be difficult to continue the investigation." Seeing this, I believe everyone understood. In fact, Brother Ju's method was to first infuriate the person being questioned by false accusations and nonsense, then claim that he was in a deadlock, so that the other party would say something that they wouldn't say in a normal interrogation. At the end of the day, it was all a scam. The reaction of an innocent person to an accusation is bound to be different from that of a murderer. When these two types of people realized that the detective in front of them was incompetent, they would have different psychological changes. In addition, Brother Ju had also carefully arranged the order of the people who entered the room, because he had other tricks up his sleeve. The classic, "someone has already sold you out," was one of them, but that was a story for another day. As an experienced investigator, Schofield was naturally well versed in the tricks of separate interrogations. However, he had many misgivings about the case in front of him. Without any evidence at hand, it was inappropriate to use cops to deal with this group of law-abiding citizens who had no criminal record. Even if the case was solved in the end, people would not think of him. If the case was not solved, there would be endless trouble in the future. Furthermore, this trouble was not as simple as complaining to the higher-ups. Just as Fong Bujue said, Mrs. Caroline's family was the biggest tycoon in Aseri, and one had to add the word biggest in front of biggest. How much power did this family have in the country? For example, one night in the middle of the night, you reversed your car in an alley and accidentally killed one of their family members. Then, you would be sentenced to 7 years in prison. You would have to sell your house for compensation until you went bankrupt and your family was separated. After 7 years of court, you would be left with nothing. Then, on the same night, you were crossing the road with the traffic light green, and their family member was speeding on the street and happened to hit you and kill you. Then, that person would be sentenced to 3 years in prison with 1 year of probation. After 1 year, he would not be jailed due to good behavior. The compensation was not small, but it was only enough to buy a wheel from the sports car. In summary, if Schofield had not only failed to catch the real murderer, but also tried to frame this family, then he could basically retire early. He also couldn't expect to find another job. People could easily ruin his reputation in the national media and say that he used to be a prostitute before he became a police officer. Therefore, the detective had never thought about this at all. But he didn't expect Fong Bujue, a third party, to propose a similar interrogation strategy and volunteer to carry it out. Of course, Schofield wouldn't refuse Brother Ju's proposal. After all, they weren't the ones who offended people. Besides, Fong Bujue was a well-known detective. The monk could run away, but the temple couldn't. If the case really wasn't solved, Schofield could just vent his anger on him. Okay. After hesitating for a while, Carol finally relented. "If you have to say who has a motive, I guess. I'm just guessing. Don't worry, I won't say that you accuse someone in front of others." Seeing that Schofield had taken the bait, Fong Bujue quickly reassured her. "Maybe it's Odetta. Carol's gaze turned to the side. Women are such scary creatures. Feng Bujue did not show it on the surface, but internally, he was thinking, ever since you entered the room, the two of you have been chatting happily. After the incident, it was she who stayed by your side, but in the end, you still managed to say her name. Oh? Why do you think so? Feng Bujue quickly asked. At the same time, he gave Schofield a look, indicating that the detective shouldn't interrupt. I don't know. Maybe it's because of old Master Colston's inheritance, Carol said. Dennis is the eldest son, so he's the biggest threat to her as a stepmother, right? And she stopped talking. And a 28-year-old woman marrying a 55-year-old man. It must have been for money in the first place. Feng Bujue said what Schofield couldn't say. Carol didn't answer him. She just lowered her head and didn't say anything. Okay, I understand. Feng Bujue said. Thank you very much for the information. I'll reconsider the whole case with the detective. He had already gotten what he wanted, so he stretched out his hand and gestured for her to leave. Please. After Mrs. Carroll left, Feng Bujue told Dempsey, who was outside the door, to bring in the next suspect. He then closed the door behind him. You're really sharp, Mr. Feng. Before Brother Ju could turn around, Schofield said, There are some things that even I can't say. Let's be frank. Just now I was so despicable, wasn't I? Feng Bujue laughed self-deprecatingly. No, no, no. Schofield smiled and waved his hand. In fact, his expression was tacit agreement. Sometimes, in order to achieve the goal of questioning, Feng Bujue said in an indifferent tone, It's inevitable that people will hate you. He walked back to the desk. It doesn't matter if the other party is male or female, old or young, tall or short. It doesn't matter if they're rich or poor. It doesn't matter if they're a president, a beggar, a priest, or a hoodlum. A detective only has one goal: to get the information he wants out of them, not to win their favor. Yes, yes. Schofield nodded, looking as if he had learned something. Feng Bujue continued, So, next, I'll make increasingly nasty remarks without losing my composure. You'd better be mentally prepared. Chapter 392. Note: the part in this chapter is Detective Schofield's inner mockery. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door again, and it was Dempsey's voice. Sir, Master Colston is here. Please come in, Schofield replied. The door opened, and Odetta appeared at the door, supporting Master Colston. After they entered the house, Colston sat down unceremoniously. After all, this was his home, and Feng Bujue and the police officers had already stolen the limelight. Sorry, we'd like to talk to Mr. Lovecraft alone, Feng Bujue said to the hostess. Can you leave first? Well. Odetta looked at Colston questioningly, and the latter nodded at her. Odetta hesitated for a moment before she walked out the door. Before she left, she seemed to remember something and turned around. Officers, Butler Henderson is awake. The doctor said that he's fine. It's getting late. If it's possible, I'd like to ask Oliver to prepare dinner. I have no objections, Schofield said. Feng Bujue looked at Colston, who didn't seem to have any objections, so he replied, Then I'll have to trouble you, ma'am. After Odetta left, Dempsey closed the door again, leaving the three of them in the room. Schofield was still sitting in his seat, but Feng Bujue began to pace slowly around Master Colston. I'm sorry to bother you again and again at a time like this, Feng Bujue said. Well, the opening is exactly the same as before. It's fine. It's your duty, Colston replied, neither servile nor overbearing. Hey. It's too strange that even the answer is the same. Only the tone is different, but the content is exactly the same. But the next sentence should be different, because Colston has already sat down, so Mr. Feng can't say, Please sit down. I'll get straight to the point, Feng Bujue continued. The murderer is someone in this villa, right between us. Hey! He used the exact same line after skipping that line. There was no change in Colston's expression as he calmly replied, "Who do you suspect? I have indeed thought of some hypotheses." Fong Bujue pretended to be embarrassed and said, "But before I am completely sure, I want to hear your opinion first. This script is memorized by heart. I can also ask according to this method." Colston raised his head and met Fong Bujue's gaze. He coldly said, "Do you want me to accuse one of my family members?" "Not all of them are family members," Fong Bujue said. "Henderson, Oliver, Barton, and Powell, none of them have the surname Lovecraft." "In my eyes they are family," Colston replied. "I don't want to believe that any of them are murderers." "Oh, this old man is quite humane. Can't you think of anyone who has the motive to kill Dennis?" Fong Bujue asked. "Yes," Colston replied. "It's you. You've turned the tables." "Me?" Fong Bujue said. "Haha," he sneered, looking like he was asking for a beating. "What's your basis?" "There's no special basis," Colston replied. "It's just that your background is unknown. I heard from Carol that you suddenly appeared on the mountain road to stop a car. Isn't that suspicious? Maybe you're just a fake detective, and you're actually a killer or something. After killing my son, you used the identity of a detective as a cover to point the finger at someone else. That way you can clear your name." As Colston spoke, Fong Bujue slowly walked to the desk, picked up the booklet on the table, and silently flipped through it. Until Colston finished speaking, Brother Jew did not respond. He just continued to flip through the pages with his back facing Colston. "Are you listening?" After nearly 10 seconds of silence, Colston spoke again. "Ah? What? Are you done?" Fong Bujue turned his head, widened his eyes, and looked at Colston with a sneaky expression. "Hey, you obviously heard it. Are you pretending not to? But this should be a way to provoke the other party." "Sorry, when you said, 'there's no special basis,' I started to ignore it," Fong Bujue continued. "With this sentence at the bottom, the rest of the content is basically nonsense." "Young man," Colston sneered. "If you want to provoke me, don't you think it's too funny to use a childish trick like pretending to ignore? After a series of deductions, you're unhappy because you don't have an audience." Fong Bujue responded with a similar sneer. "It seems that I've overestimated you before. You might as well curse at me. And your mouth is dirty. 5 minutes ago, you said a lot of things in a cool manner, and in the end, you were the one who emphasized to me that I should not lose my composure. Let me tell you what real deductions are." Fong Bujue's eyes turned cold as he stared at Colston. "I swear in the name of Grandpa, the mystery has been solved. I say, I feel like there are some strange lines that have been thrown in. Who is your grandpa?" "You've already ruled out Colston as a suspect with the excuse of leg trouble. Now, you're undoubtedly going to say something to slander him. Is it really okay for your grandpa to lose his integrity in his old age? What are you trying to say?" Colston glared at Fong Bujue and asked. "You're the murderer." Fong Bujue pointed at Colston with an imposing manner. "Are you crazy? Do you know what you're saying?" Colston was not a woman like Carol. He was very calm and even turned to look at Schofield. "Detective, is this person really a detective? What's the attitude of the police?" Fong Bujue did not care what he said and continued to say, "I've already solved the mystery of the locked room. When the door was locked, the murderer used a weapon like steel wire to kill Dennis. Then, he jumped out of the window and used the weapon to lock the window from the outside." He raised the booklet in his hand. "You told Officer Mark that an hour before the murder, Dr. Powell took your blood pressure. After that, you stayed in the room to rest. In other words, you had enough time to sneak to the guest room on the first floor, kill him, leave the room, throw away the weapon, and then return to your room." Colston heard this and thought for a few seconds. "Is this your deduction?" He snorted and stomped the floor with his cane. "Then please tell me, How did a person who can't even walk without a cane kill someone with a steel wire? How did he jump out of the window? Chapter 393. Humph! Feng Bujue snorted coldly. You're faking it, aren't you? He didn't believe it himself, but he still pointed at Colston's legs and said, in order to set up this secret chamber today, in order to clear the suspicion of murder. From 3 years ago, you pretended that you couldn't walk properly and used crutches in your daily life. What the hell are you talking about? Colston was shocked. This theory was unbelievable. Who would pretend to be a cripple for 3 years in order to murder his own son? Pretending to sprain his legs 3 days before the murder would have the same effect. But in fact, you're still agile. With your skills as a retired veteran, killing someone is a piece of cake. Feng Bujue continued, as for the motive, I think everyone in this house saw it today. When you were arguing with Dennis, you actually fired 2 shots, which means that you couldn't stand him anymore. If it weren't for the fact that it would be too easy to find out after the shooting, you wouldn't have aimed at the ceiling. You. Colston was finally infuriated and became part of Brother Jew's taunts. He roared furiously, You be asterisk starred. What the F asterisk CK are you talking about? What? Are you angry after I exposed you? Feng Bujue maintained an arrogant expression and said, Or, do you think there's a flaw in my flawless reasoning? Hey, is there a flaw in your flawed reasoning? Schofield continued to complain in his heart. Because Brother Jew's words were so nonsensical, the detective was too embarrassed to speak up. You. After Colston cursed a few times, he seemed to calm down a little. He was still a reasonable person, so he replied, You can ask Dr. Powell about my physical condition. He glared at Feng Bujue. If you think I bribed the doctor, I can show you the certificate issued by the best hospital in the country, as well as my insurance records. Feng Bujue immediately put on an awkward expression and stammered, So that's how it is, so, do you still think it's a piece of cake for me to kill someone? Feng Bujue rubbed his chin and muttered, But it's true that you had a fierce argument with Dennis today. He pretended to be enlightened. Yes. The murderer must be Dr. Powell. After you had an argument with Dennis and kicked him out, you and Powell conspired to kill someone in the room. He was the executor, and you were the mastermind. At the time, I only asked Powell to take my blood pressure and inject me with today's medicine, Colston replied. This is something I have to do every day. He paused for a moment. Also, why would Dr. Powell kill someone for me? He's not a killer. Do you think that if I told someone who works in the villa, I'll give you a sum of money to kill someone for me, that person would do it? That's hard to say, Feng Bujue said as he turned his back to Colston and slowly walked toward the desk. At that moment, his gaze changed and his tone became cold. If you've made up your mind to kill someone, there's always a way. He probed. That depends on how serious the conflict between you and Dennis is. That's my son. What conflict could there be between us? Colston asked. Even if there is a conflict, it's impossible for there to be any killing intent. Then, may I ask, what is the core of your conflict today? Feng Bujue asked. This is my family matter, Colston replied in a low voice. Family matter? Feng Bujue smiled. With all due respect, if you can avoid the question with just these 2 words, then probably half of the murder cases in the world won't get a confession. He began to mislead the other party. From the time you and Dennis quarreled and fired the gun to when he was killed and discovered, there was only a little over an hour. Master Colston, you're also a knowledgeable person. You should know very well that no matter who investigates this case, you won't be able to avoid the question in the end, what exactly did you and Dennis quarrel about? If you tell me now, Detective Schofield and I will be the only ones who know about this. After the case is solved, no one will bring it up again. But if you insist on not saying anything and the case drags on, One day you'll be forced to answer on the witness stand or in the dock in court. At that time, there will be a jury, reporters, and a bunch of ordinary citizens watching the show. The person asking you questions is likely to be a biased prosecutor who hates the rich and will induce you to say more things that are disadvantageous to you. And your answers will all be recorded by the court and even published in the newspapers. That's enough. Colston was tricked by Fong Bujue just like that. Due to the concern that Fong Bujue had given him, the old man had to make a decision. If that's the case. His eyes scanned Fong Bujue and Schofield's faces separately. I can tell you, but you have to promise that this will not be leaked to other people, especially my family. I promise, sir, Schofield said. I'm a man of my word. Fong Bujue also said, don't worry, this won't spread outside of this study. At this point, Brother Ju finally got his way. He had never doubted Colston. The reason why he had taken such a big detour was to get the family head to personally say what exactly Dennis and his quarrel was about. Although Barton had already told Fong Bujue the secret, Brother Ju didn't completely trust the gardener. So, he wanted to hear it from Colston himself. Of course, even if what Colston said was different from what Barton said, it didn't prove that Barton was lying. After all, Dennis was dead, and Colston could say whatever he wanted. He didn't know that Barton had gone to Fong Bujue. There was a third scenario, both of them were lying and the situation was even more complicated. Dennis wanted to monopolize my inheritance, Colston said. This was his answer. Monopolize, is it? Fong Bujue asked knowingly. So, you have a will? And the content of this will didn't satisfy Dennis, did it? Yes, I have a will, Colston said. But other than me and my lawyer, no one knows the content of the will. He paused for a few seconds. Of course, Dennis doesn't know either, but he thinks in that will I distributed the inheritance to inappropriate people, so we quarreled. This was roughly the same as what Barton said, but he was evasive. Obviously, he omitted Odetta's name. However, Fong Bujue faintly felt that there was more to Colston's words. Chapter 394. After seeing Colston off, Fong Bujue returned to his seat behind the desk and fell into deep thought. Schofield didn't disturb him. The detective was also pondering over the information he had obtained earlier. Moments later, Fong Bujue opened his mouth to say, "At this moment, I really envy someone like Nero Wolfe, a famous detective written by Leiterstadt, a fat, unwilling to leave the house, a professional detective who likes to raise orchids and charges exorbitant fees for consulting. Well, I think if you want, you can also become an excellent, easy-chair detective," Schofield said. "Of course I can." Fong Bujue's narcissistic nature kicked in, and he said without any modesty, "When I say envy, I don't mean envy of this person's talent, I just envy that he doesn't have to participate in this kind of tedious intelligence-gathering work." Schofield shrugged and said, "It can't be helped. Although there are only a total of 9 suspects in this case, the information Mark got during the routine questioning isn't enough to lock down the murderer. At present, there are basically 3 suspects that can be ruled out: the owner, Colston Lovecraft, the butler, Henderson, and the maid, Olivia." Fong Bujue muttered, "One of them doesn't have the ability to commit the crime, the other doesn't have the guts to commit the crime, and the last one is a problem of body size." "Body size?" Schofield asked. "You noticed it too?" Fong Bujue said, "Aunt Olivia is only about 1.6 meters tall, and she's at least heavier than Dennis. With her large body, even if she could barely climb out of the window, it's impossible for her to complete the layout of the secret room outside the window." Yes. Schofield obviously just understood. He thought for a few seconds and continued the topic. "But why didn't you rule out the gardener as a suspect? When Mrs. Carroll found the body, Mr. Barton was talking to you in your room, wasn't he?" "So what?" Fong Bujue replied faintly. "Maybe he had just finished the crime before he came to my room?" As far as I can see, no one in this house has a valid alibi, he added. Not even myself. So, Mr. Detective, you have to be careful. Although the chances are slim, you can't completely rule out the possibility that I committed the crime. How is that possible? Schofield laughed. You have no motive at all. Besides, Mr. Dennis helped you, didn't he? What if I'm crazy? Fong Bujua asked seriously. Don't you think I'm crazy? Just as Schofield was hesitating whether or not he should say out loud that they did look alike, there was a knock on the door again. Outside the door, Dempsey said, Sir, Mr. Jack Lovecraft is here. Schofield quickly replied, Okay, let him in. Jack pushed the door open and strode to the middle of the room. When Deng Pudi closed the door behind him, he turned his head and glanced at him. Then, he looked at Fong Bujua and Schofield with an indifferent expression and said, This is nothing. Is it an interrogation? No, I just have some questions that I want to ask you, Fong Bujua replied with a smile. Ha! Jack laughed and sat down on the chair, crossing his legs. The famous detective wants to ask me for advice? Before the police came, you didn't seem to have heard of my name, did you? Fong Bujua asked. Yeah, I don't read the newspapers much, Jack said. Even if I did, I didn't pay much attention to reports about criminal investigations. Well, I guess you mainly read the entertainment section. Fong Bujua was implying something. Yes, I used to be the lead singer of a rock band. Jack's eyes stared at the booklet in Fong Bujua's hand, and he drawled, I've already told the other officer. What's wrong? Is this against the law? Of course it's not against the law, Fong Bujua said. But if your outdated lead singer killed his brother, hey, what are you talking about? Jack shouted. What's wrong? Fong Bujua's annoying behavior came back again. Are you dissatisfied with the word, outdated? Or do you have an opinion about the murder charge? Or perhaps both? Do you have any evidence? Jack replied. If there's no evidence, then it's slander. Evidence? Fong Bujua sneered. You should be glad that I don't have such a gun. He repeated, word for word, this sentence was the last sentence you said to Dennis before the crime was committed, right? Many people heard it, including me. So what? Jack asked. Everyone could tell that it was just a joke. If he's not dead, then it's just a joke. Fong Bujua put his right hand on the desk, his 4 fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk like wave. But now that he's dead, the situation is different. Combined with the situation at that time, can I understand what you mean? If I had such a gun, I wouldn't be shooting at the ceiling. Nonsense. It's all nonsense. Jack jumped up from his chair. What kind of detective are you? He turned to look at Schofield. Officer, are you just going to watch him wrongly accuse a good person like this? I also think that you're the most suspicious. Of all the suspects, you're the only one whose physique is comparable to the victim's. From a psychological point of view, the stronger one is more courageous, isn't that right? Schofield put on the air of a detective and glared at the man sternly. Of all the suspects, you're the only one whose physique is comparable to the victim's. You. Jack was speechless. Since you mentioned the rock band, Fong Bujua immediately continued, then I think you're familiar with things like strings. He paused for a moment and said, coincidentally, the murder weapon is similar. You know what? If it weren't for the police, I would have come over to beat you up, Jack squeezed out in a very unhappy tone. Humph. I advise you not to be impulsive. Fong Bujua raised his eyebrows and replied smugly, my fierce kicking skills can't be stopped by a mere desk. Gentlemen, let's return to a constructive discussion, Schofield said. Schofield had no choice but to persuade him. The words and actions of the 2 people in front of him were already like street thugs fighting on the streets. Humph. Jack snorted and sat down again. He said to Fong Bujua, then tell me, why did I kill my brother? Was it because of today's argument? I still don't know why he and my dad were arguing. Why would I kill someone? Chapter 395. Motivation, huh? Fong Bujue began to bullshit. I can see that the relationship between you two brothers is not that good. It's not too much to say that it's thin, right? He shrugged. Brother Ling has a steady personality and a successful career. You, on the other hand, are already in your 30s, but you've basically achieved nothing and don't have a stable source of income. Brother Ju's ability to fill in the blanks was unparalleled. He continued, personality determines fate, Jack. I've seen a lot of young people like you. They talk about chasing their dreams, but in reality, they just use the word dream as an excuse to indulge, a way to deceive themselves and others. He picked up the booklet in his hand, flipped through it, and read, when you were 19, you ignored your family's objections and dropped out of university. You joined a third-rate rock band as the lead singer. In the next 5 or 6 years, you and your band will travel around and perform. Most of the time, you won't earn any income, and the response to your performances will be mixed. So basically, you guys are using your family's money to pay for your so-called dreams. Huh? What do you know? How can a person like you understand the meaning of our music? You're just a civilian who's been brainwashed by warmongers, religionists, and bureaucrats, Jack said disdainfully. You're obviously younger than me. Why are you using such a high and mighty tone? You're like a cockroach. Fong Bujue interrupted him and said in a cold tone, a half-baked hippie, a pioneer of non-mainstream culture. I know people like you very well. Selfish, self-centered, greedy for pleasure, gluttonous and lazy. You rebel against the values that the previous generation instilled in you, but you don't really have your own opinions. You hate the greed of the plutocrats, lament the narrowness of traditional morality, and oppose the immorality of war. So you use rock music to express your dissatisfaction, showing your cynical emotions. You shout love and peace, thinking that you're pure, excited, and great, but the world doesn't change with ease. In the end, when all this is over, one day your parents will grow old. Because you use a variety of high-sounding reasons to shirk the social responsibility as an adult, your own youth is ultimately wasted in meaningless escape. When you look back, behind you is a stupid young man with an embarrassing haircut, smoking a joint and shouting empty slogans. Your idealism sounds beautiful, but you don't have the ability to realize it. Thinking is thinking. Thinking is not wrong, just like Marxism. Can you say that it is wrong? However, a group of people who are detached from reality and hold lofty ideals while actually living a life of parasites will only be annoying. Jack was dumbfounded. Not only Jack, but even Schofield was dumbfounded. The two of them didn't know what to say. I was once a cynic, Jack. Fong Bujue leaned back in his chair and lifted his head to say leisurely, if you think a guy like you, who makes trashy music, smokes weed, flirts with girls, and travels around the world at his own expense, can be counted as changing the world, then Martin Luther King and I can form a rap group and release a record. He rested his head on his hands. Do you think you can change the world by casually publishing a few sentences that imply social and anti-government opinions in your work? I tried a long time ago, but it didn't work. Jack was completely stunned. His family and friends wouldn't tell him these views, and even if they did, they wouldn't say it so sharply. Let's go back to the previous topic. Fong Bujue turned a page of the booklet and continued, 5 or 6 years later, your band signed a contract with a similarly unpopular record company and released an album. But the sales were obviously not very good because the company soon went out of business. He paused. Not long after that, your band disbanded. Later, you went to North America and found a job writing soundtracks for TV commercials for a living. Ha. His sarcasm was obvious. How does it feel to work for those fat tycoons? Jack couldn't refute, so he could only change the topic. What does this have to do with my brother's death? Don't worry, we're about to get to the point, buddy. Feng Bujua laughed. Ideals are very beautiful, but to talk about ideals, you must first withstand the beating of reality. He spread out his hands. You're lucky, Jack, because you were born into a rich family. For you, a good life, the right to education, and financial resources after dropping out of school, these are all things that you can reach out your hand. He paused for a moment. And you are also unfortunate. Because you were born into a wealthy family, reality punched you in the face a little too late. The life that your father gave you is something that many people can only dream of, but you squandered it. A few years ago, when your father finally couldn't take it anymore and stopped all financial aid to you, you were nearly 30 years old, and for the first time in your life, you were alone and faced the monster of reality. You've realized that living isn't such a simple thing. In the adult world, nothing is simple, and nothing is taken for granted. To eat, you have to work. To live a good life, you have to work harder. To become a person above others, you have to excel. To change the world. Humph. I'm not going to discuss this topic with you. Feng Bujue stood up from the chair and slowly walked over. Today, you must know better than anyone what it's like to live without money. Living in a cheap hotel without hot water, sleeping on a dirty bed, eating only 2 meals a day, with only bread and running water for each meal. After writing a song and sending it out, you have to be on tenterhooks, afraid that it will be rejected, because that means starvation. He walked in front of Jack and looked down at him with eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything. You are a rich man. After going through such ups and downs, you must have become much more tenacious. And your fear of poverty will be worse than those who have never been rich. Brother Ju sneered and continued, in recent years your father's health has been deteriorating, which is undoubtedly a very bad sign. If he dies, what will he leave behind for your rebellious second son? In the eyes of this family, aren't you just an irresponsible playboy who only knows how to fool around and ask for money? No matter how much of the family business is left to you, it will all be squandered away. Jack's eyes showed that he wanted to defend himself, but Feng Bujue immediately increased his tone and speed, not giving him a chance to speak. Let's not talk about how much your stepmother and your sister will get. According to the usual order of inheritance, Dennis will undoubtedly be a huge obstacle for you to get the inheritance. Although it was a false accusation, what he said was reasonable. The relationship between you two brothers wasn't good to begin with. For the sake of this family business, which is enough to change the rest of your life. Isn't it natural that you want to kill him? Schofield added, That makes sense. Today's quarrel was the fuse. You made up your mind when you were in the corridor, and after you returned to your room to plan, you went to carry out the murder. The detective had a basic understanding of Brother Ju's bullsh *T routine, so it was easy for him to help him. Jack really didn't expect that from the information he and his family had divulged to Officer Mark, this detective would be able to vividly describe the first half of his life. In fact, Feng Bujue himself didn't expect this either. He had just combined different people's descriptions of Jack's experiences over the years, and then used his own imagination to speculate about the changes in Jack's heart at different stages of his life, and irresponsibly used his talent as a novelist to connect the dots. He didn't expect that everything he said, including the fact that Jack wanted to kill Dennis, was true. Jack gritted his teeth and laughed in anger. Okay, since you two have come to this. He stood up and spread his hand. Then I'll be frank. He sneered. Anyway, I didn't kill anyone. Whether there was a motive or not, it doesn't matter. Before Carol found the body, I stayed in my room and packed my luggage. I didn't even take half a step out. I didn't kill him, so I didn't kill him. I won't confess. If you really have evidence, you can arrest me. As he spoke, he put on a rogue look and stretched out his hands to Schofield. Chapter 396. After Jack left the study, Feng Bujue returned to his seat with a smile on his face. He then turned to look at Schofield, who had a serious expression on his face. "What do you think, detective?" he asked. Schofield replied, "It's very suspicious. So far, he's the most suspicious one." "Indeed," Feng Bujue continued, "Jack has the motive, the time, and the ability to commit the crime. But I don't think he's the murderer." Schofield was puzzled. "Why?" Feng Bujue asked in return, "Detective, if you were Jack, how would you feel when you saw your father and brother arguing fiercely?" Well, Schofield put himself in Jack's shoes after being reminded by his brother Bujue. He immediately came to a realization. "I should be happy." "Yes." Feng Bujue nodded affirmatively. If his motive for killing or his ultimate goal was the family fortune, he should be secretly happy when he saw the scene today. After all, in the eyes of his family, he was just rebellious and immature. It wasn't an irreconcilable conflict. As for the conflict between Dennis and Colston, it's hard to say. "So?" Schofield asked tentatively. "So, logically speaking, even if Jack wanted to kill Dennis, he wouldn't have chosen to do it today." Feng Bujue continued, "In my opinion, after the gunshot incident, Jack said those words because he was secretly happy when he saw his father and brother arguing, so he spoke arrogantly. These words had indeed inadvertently revealed some of his inner thoughts. But someone who really wanted to commit murder would have done it without any warning beforehand, and wouldn't have left such an obvious flaw." He paused for a moment and said, "Also, did you notice the wording he used at the end? It doesn't matter if there's a motive or not." This sentence is basically admitting that he once had the intention to kill, but he wasn't afraid at all. Whether it was the look in his eyes, tone, or subtle body language, that sentence, "I didn't kill anyone anyway," was the truth. Brother Bujue rested his elbows on the table and held his cheek. The confidence in his words wasn't the confidence of a criminal, but the confidence of an innocent person. There's a difference between the two. The former means that the police can't find enough evidence to convict him, while the latter, it's purely because he didn't do anything. Jack belongs to the latter, and it's like he's not afraid of a crooked shadow. "So," Schofield muttered, "Jack's possibility of being the murderer basically can't be ruled out." "Yes," Feng Bujue replied, "at this stage. Colston, Henderson, Oliver, Carroll, and Jack, these 5 people can be ruled out for the time being." Schofield muttered, "There are a total of 9 suspects, so now the only ones left are the family doctor, Mr. Powell, the gardener, Mr. Barton, Miss Nancy, and Mrs. Odetta." He paused. "By the way, Miss Nancy arrived after the case, so she should be ruled out directly, right?" "Who said so?" Feng Bujue asked. "Nancy has all the conditions to commit the crime, and even has an advantage over the others." His eyes changed slightly. "If we can find a motive, then she's more suspicious than Jack." Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. "Speak of the devil, Miss Nancy is here, sir." Dempsey's voice happened to come from outside the door. "Please come in," Schofield replied. The door opened and Miss Nancy walked in. Her attire was quite neutral, a plain white blouse with a jacket, classic jeans, and boots with thick heels. This lady from a wealthy family didn't seem to be affected by the literary atmosphere of Vienna at all. Instead, she looked more like she had gone to the American West. However, the tomboy outfit didn't hide her charm. Miss Nancy was still an eye-catching beauty. On her fair and delicate face, there were bright eyes, white teeth, full lips, and a fine nose. Her blonde hair casually draped over her shoulders, reflecting a touch of brightness under the light. Unlike Madame Odetta's mature and sexy classical beauty, Nancy's body exuded more youthful vigor. Her eyes revealed determination and experience, and Feng Bujue could faintly see the aura of a modern feminist. "Hello, Miss Nancy." After Dempsey closed the door, Feng Bujue said, "I don't think we've officially met." He stood up, walked out from behind the desk, and extended his hand. My name is Feng Bujue, and I'm a detective. Nancy politely shook the other party's outstretched hand. Nice to meet you, Mr. Feng. Her voice was as downcast as her mood. This is Detective Schofield. You've met him in the lobby. Feng Bujue then introduced the detective. Schofield stood up, one hand on the brim of his hat and the other extended. At your service, ma'am. Nice to meet you, detective, Nancy replied as she shook hands with him. Please sit down, Miss Nancy, Feng Bujue said. Don't be nervous. We just have some questions for you. Okay, Nancy answered as she sat down. But I can't guarantee that I'll be able to help you. You know, when I arrived, Dennis was all ready. Is that really the case? Feng Bujue's attitude suddenly took a turn for the worse. What did you say? Nancy asked with a puzzled expression. Perhaps the time you arrived here is earlier than we thought. Feng Bujue was using his actions to let these NPCs know the meaning of the saying, if you have a mind to condemn someone, you can easily find a reason to do so. What do you mean? Nancy sensed that there was a hidden meaning in his words. I'm using my imagination, Feng Bujue replied. This is a very important skill for a detective. We have to follow logical rules and common rules, but we can't be bound by these inertial thoughts. He smiled. In short, what I'm about to say may sound bizarre and may offend you. So, I want to make it clear in advance that everything I'm saying is just speculation. If some of it makes you feel uncomfortable, I hope you can understand. So it's this again. But this Miss Nancy clearly only appeared after the crime was committed. How can he frame her like this? Schofield thought to himself. He really couldn't imagine what kind of reasoning Feng Bujue would come up with. What are you trying to say? Nancy asked. Feng Bujue sneered, swung his arm, and said to Miss Nancy aggressively, The murderer who killed Dennis is you, Nancy Lovecraft. Chapter 397. Schofield's retort had returned. The expression on Nancy's face quickly changed from confusion to shock. This is so preposterous. What makes you say that? Feng Bujue laughed. Humph. It's an expected reaction. He continued to spout nonsense. Let this detective retell the story of your crime. To put it bluntly, you're just making things up again. Schofield thought. But this trick sure works. It was an autumn. Feng Bujue started to narrate. You suddenly changed to a very old voice, and your face was so serious. What are you up to? Like previous years, you returned to a seri from Vienna and came to your father's bungalow to celebrate Thanksgiving. Feng Bujue raised his head in confusion and recited. The autumn was deep in the mountains, and the red maple trees were like fire. The slight chill in the air made one want to put on a pair of long johns. Hey, the beginning of a ghost story, the foreshadowing of a hipster, and the ending of the story with such a sentence? You were driving on the deserted road, and under the influence of the scenery before your eyes, you suddenly thought, how about I kill my elder brother? Feng Bujue continued. A few minutes ago you were the one who said, we have to follow the rules of logic and common rules, but we can't be bound by these habitual thoughts, right? It was really you, wasn't it? Please restrain yourself. Mr. Feng, if you want to use this method to make me laugh. Nancy interrupted. I can tell you clearly that this is not a good idea. Feng Bujue ignored her and continued to lie. As the daughter of old Master Colston's second wife, your status in this family is a bit inferior. In recent years, your father's health has been deteriorating, and you have to consider your own future after his death. Using the same motive repeatedly to frame different people, you've been a good girl in the eyes of your family since you were young. You followed your father's will and walked on the life path that he arranged for you. Feng Bujue's imagination was running wild. In front of the people involved, he observed their expressions and continued to make up the story. Since elementary school, you've been excellent in your studies, upright, talented, and well-educated. You're like the legendary other people's child. When you were 18, you entered the prestigious music academy in Vienna and stayed on as a teacher after you graduated. In other people's eyes, your life is perfect. You have a good family background, good looks, and a good personality. You have a stable job, a good income, and a high social status. You have a life like this is no doubt what every girl wants, but what do you think? Hey, it's not appropriate for you to tell her what she thinks. Your education, your job, and even your interests, none of these were chosen by you, but by your father's wishes. Maybe you don't want that perfection because perfection makes you lose a lot. He paused for a moment. I'll give you an example. For example, you're almost 28 years old, but you're still unmarried. He spread out his hands and shook his head. The only reason I can think of for a lady like you to remain unmarried is that all the outstanding men think that you are unattainable and flinch at the sight of you. And some men who overestimate themselves and are only good for their looks make you hate them. In short, I'm afraid that your inner world is not as happy and carefree as it seems to others. Feng Bujue said, no matter how perfect you are, you don't get more attention than your two brothers. He said in a sarcastic tone, you're like a dog. When your master tells you to sit down, you sit down. When he tells you to play dead, you play dead. When he tells you to roll, you roll. You stick out your tongue and wag your tail to make yourself perfect. You don't do it for the dog food, but to get the attention and approval of your master. You'd better change your career to multi-level marketing. You can even be a cult leader. By the way, why does Miss Nancy look like she's about to believe me? Miss Nancy, you have to hold on. Don't let others change your settings with just a few words. But the reality is cruel. A stepmother's child is a stepmother's child. Feng Bujue continued, from Colston's attitude toward marriage, you can also see his attitude toward women. After all, he values his two sons more. Even the disappointing second son, didn't he grit his teeth and support him for nearly 10 years? His face darkened. So you hate your father, and this emotion will soon make you vent your anger on Dennis and Jack. After all, these two guys are just your half-brothers. If my father dies, he will definitely leave his inheritance to Dennis is a reasonable idea in my opinion. Feng Bujue said, the psychological factor is jealousy, and the material factor is the inheritance. With these two factors, you have enough motivation to do the deed. After brainwashing for so long, are we finally going to talk about the case? Today, you didn't come as late as you looked. In fact, you arrived early, and you were the first to arrive. Feng Bujue said, as early as this morning, you hid the car in the woods a few miles away from the villa. Then, with the murder weapon, a string, and gloves, you quietly walked to the villa on foot. He described it vividly, as if he had seen it with his own eyes. Anyway, the murder weapon is easy to hide. Even if you were seen by someone in the villa before the murder, it doesn't matter. Just say that the car broke down in the woods and you had to walk back. That's enough to cover it up. He changed the topic. You have the key to the villa's gate, so it's not difficult to sneak in. Things went smoothly, and no one found out that you had sneaked into the villa. So, you took the opportunity to hide and waited for the right opportunity. In the afternoon, Dennis and Jack came. Then, there was the shooting incident. You, who was observing in the dark, felt that the time was right. If you took action today, not only could you get rid of Dennis, but you could also make Jack take the blame for you. You could let your father watch his two sons die one after another, and then hand over his life's inheritance to you, the real criminal that he had neglected all these years. This could be said to be the perfect revenge. Not long after, you saw that Dennis was alone, so you directly knocked on the door and entered his room. When he heard your voice, he naturally wasn't on guard. He must have thought that you had just arrived at the villa and wanted to chat with him. Then, you killed him and set up the room as a secret room. Then, you escaped from the window. After the murder, you went back to where you hid the car, got rid of the murder weapon and gloves, adjusted your emotions, and thought about how you should react to the police. After some time, you came late and put on a good show in front of us. Oh, so that's how it is. I was almost fooled by her. Schofield himself was also fooled. Phew! When Nancy heard this, she sighed deeply and said to her brother Jew, "It's a waste of your talent to be a detective. I think you should be a writer." He he he. Fong Bujue touched the back of his head with one hand and smiled proudly. He almost said, "I'm not that good." Although their personalities were quite different in terms of ability, Nancy was the closest to her father among the three children. She was a very smart woman and was not easily frightened. When facing Fong Bujue's ridiculous accusations, she did not panic like Carol, nor did she fly into a rage like Jack. Just like her father, Nancy refuted with facts and logic. "My flight was delayed. You can go to the airline to check what time my flight arrived at the airport," Nancy said. "Also, the car that I drove here was rented. I think there will be many witnesses at the place where I rented the car. They will remember my appearance and the time that I appeared and left." She paused for a moment. "If your math is not too bad, you should be able to calculate how long it took for me to arrive here from the place where I rented the car." Fong Bujue put on a helpless look again, as if he was a villain who was about to be killed. He stuttered, What?" His confident reasoning was defeated with just 2 sentences. Chapter 398. In the silence, Miss Nancy cast a look of disdain at Brother Jew. Then, she got up and was about to leave. Before she left, she turned to Detective Schofield and said, "I hope you'll think carefully before making any inferences." Then, she slammed the door shut. Phew! As soon as the door closed, Fong Bujue let out a long sigh of relief and said, "Very good, another suspect has been ruled out." "I don't understand. Why didn't you ask her for an alibi in the normal way?" Schofield asked. "Don't you think my way would have worked better?" Fong Bujue said, "Using lame reasoning to probe the reaction of the person involved is likely to yield unexpected results. At the same time, it can also make them lower their guard against me." Is that so?" Schofield took out his handkerchief and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. "How is that possible?" Fong Bujue said, "Can you believe Officer Mu's lines when she was helping Mr. Kagoro out? There are many ways to probe the reaction of the suspect. As long as you're thick-skinned enough, like Guing, who is also a fictional detective, sticking to the suspect and harassing him or her, the suspect will definitely be exposed after a long time. No matter how you look at it, I'm just working hard for the mission. The nightmare difficulty really lives up to its name. On average, each chapter is less than 2,500 words, and so far, I've only made it through 2/3 of the chapters. This is really bad. Although I've basically confirmed that the murderer is Barton, there are still 10 chapters left. It's too early to expose him. A novel isn't like an animation, where you can just use a single frame and BGM, and then find 3 voice actresses to talk about the script for 20 minutes. A novel has to be thought out word by word. It's not right for the author to copy and paste a passage of the Great Compassion Mantra in a moment of passion, and purely from a logical point of view, there are still many suspicious points in this case. For example, Barton's motive and why he set up the room as a secret room. I still don't know. These 2 mysteries would probably only be solved in the last few chapters. As for the first 7 or 8 chapters, as the main character, I had to fill up the story. Although I did think about killing someone myself, the 33 chapters were so awkward that I missed the best opportunity to do so. Why don't I pick up the ashtray on the table and knock Schofield to death? But now that I think about it, in this kind of nightmare scenario, the NPCs should have the ability to one-shot me. Brother Jew thought to himself for a while before he made up his mind and walked towards the door. He opened the door and called out to Dempsey, who was on standby in the hallway, Officer Dempsey. What are your orders, sir? Said Dempsey. Please invite Henderson, Powell, and Barton, Fong Bujua said. All three of them together? Demuty confirmed. Yes, bring them all here. Fong Bujua nodded. Okay, please wait a moment. Dempsey adjusted his collar and turned to leave. After Fong Bujua gave his orders, he stepped back into the room and closed the door. What are you trying to do? Schofield asked curiously. What? Do you think I will continue to call them in one by one for questioning? Fong Bujua asked. Inside, he was thinking, how could you have guessed what would happen next? If you continue to use titles like so and so, the author will not be satisfied, right? Yes, the detective replied. Ha ha. Fong Bujua said, don't worry, just wait and see. To be honest, I'm fine. It's just that Miss Nancy seemed to have put you on the spot earlier. Schofield could not hold it in anymore. He was kind enough to stop Fong Bujua's self-humiliating reasoning. Fong Bujua said. Why would I be put on the spot? He turned his head to face Schofield. His expression suddenly changed, and he put on his awkward face in the next second. That's right. My voice was trembling, my forehead was sweating, and my pupils were dilated. If you look closely, you'll notice that my left hand is trembling slightly. As he spoke, he instantly returned to normal. But that doesn't mean that I really feel put on the spot. Schofield's lips twitched. He did not know how to describe his feelings at the moment. He suddenly felt that the guy in front of him was very likely a professional liar, but in all senses of the word, this guy was very good. Generally speaking, I don't make inadvertent physical reactions because of my emotions, unless I'm deliberately pretending to be in a certain state, Fong Bujua said. Expressions and small movements will expose a person's weaknesses. In turn, using these to confuse the opponent is a rather advanced gaming technique. I won't be fooled anymore. Every time you come up with various theories, you'll lose your integrity in the next chapter. I'll lose if I complain, Schofield said. However, on the surface, he was still polite. So that's how it is. Detectives not only need IQ, but they also need a high EQ. Fong Bujua started to talk nonstop again. I personally think that EQ is the combination of one's ability to guess, intuition, and acting skills. Those who are good at doing things are all well versed in EQ. They can make you do things according to their will, but they'll feel good about it. He paused for a moment. Of the three people who will enter the room, one of them has a very high EQ. Of course, his IQ is not low either, but knock, knock, knock. The knocking on the door interrupted Fong Bujua. Deng Puti said loudly from outside the door, "The three gentlemen are here, Mr. Fong. Please come in." Fong Bujua turned around and leaned against the table. He faced the door and looked like he was ready to give it a try. A few seconds later, the three men came in. The first to enter was Dr. Powell. He was in his 50s, tall and thin. He wore glasses, a white shirt, and a black vest. Henderson came in with the help of Barton. In fact, he could walk on his own, but Barton was very considerate to help the old man, who had almost had a heart attack not long ago. After Deng Puti brought him in, he closed the door from the outside as usual. Before the three opened their mouths to greet each other, Fong Bujua, who was facing them, suddenly opened his lips. "I will be frank." His eyes scanned the faces of the three like a gust of wind. "The culprit is among the three of you." Chapter 399. At that moment, the three men's expressions changed. Fong Bujua caught every change in their facial expressions, as well as the fleeting, imperceptible information hidden in their eyes. "Ha ha!" 2 seconds later, Fong Bujua started to laugh. "All right, that's all I have to say. Please leave." "What?" Other than Brother Jew, the other 4 men in the room instinctively asked the same question at the same time. "Wait, what do you mean?" Powell asked. What do you mean by please leave? You called us here, said that one of us is the murderer, and then asked us to leave? Yes. Feng Bujue said, I'll reveal the real murderer in about 8 chapters. Oh no, I mean, I'll reveal the real murderer around 8 o'clock. Mr. Feng, Schofield interrupted. Can I ask, why do we have to wait until 8 o'clock? Hey, as the saying goes, the reasoning should be done after dinner, Feng Bujue replied. What kind of saying is that? How come I've never heard of it before? You must have made it up, Schofield said to himself, but he didn't show it on his face. This was because he still couldn't identify the murderer, and he didn't have any evidence. He could only rely on this strange detective for help. Ha ha. Okay. Schofield continued to wipe his cold sweat with his handkerchief. Then we'll do as you say. This is too strange, Powell said. If you know who the real murderer is, you should bring him to justice immediately. If you let a murderer stay in the same room with us, wouldn't we all be in danger? There are 4 police officers here, so how could there be any danger? Feng Bujue replied casually. Besides, you should know very well that before I said, the murderer is one of the 3 of you, you've been living under the same roof as the murderer, right? But now that you've said it, the situation is, Powell said nervously. He kept glancing in Barton's direction. Feng Bujue interrupted him. You don't have to say any more. I've seen this kind of trick many times. He paused for a moment. Dr. Powell, you made such a big reaction and looked so frightened. Are you trying to pretend to be innocent to avoid suspicion? Powell was at a loss for words in the face of this false accusation. Henderson and Barton also looked at him suspiciously. The atmosphere became very strange. Feng Bujue only sneered at their reaction. He turned to Schofield. Before dinner, please gather the 3 of them, as well as Carol, Colston, Jack, and Nancy in the dining room. That way, it's easier to keep an eye on them. He walked around the 3 people in front of him and walked toward the door. Where are you going, Mr. Feng? Schofield asked. The kitchen, Feng Bujue replied. He opened the door and walked out. The 4 people in the study looked at each other awkwardly. The villa's kitchen was quite good. It was almost as good as some small Western restaurants. The kitchen door was naturally a double flap door that could be pushed open with a hand, foot, or push from a cart. It was very convenient to carry food in and out. After Feng Bujue pushed the door open, he was greeted with a spacious, clean, and beautiful environment. For a household kitchen, the equipment in this place was amazing. There were cabinets, grills, stoves, ovens, barbecue grills, burners, stoves, shelves, workstations, preserves, freezers, mixers, meat grinders, slicers, egg beater, and so on. Other than the extreme configuration of the stone oven, there was basically everything here. You could even hold a cooking competition. Ah, Mr. Feng, why are you in the kitchen? At this time, Mrs. Odetta had changed into a long-sleeved plain dress with a knee-length skirt. She was also wearing an apron. She was busy in front of the stove with Mrs. Oliver. To prevent you from poisoning everyone's dinner, Feng Bujue replied. Odetta and Mrs. Oliver's hands froze. Their eyes widened as they looked at Brother Jew in surprise. Ha ha! I'm just kidding, ladies, Feng Bujue said with a smile. As a guest, it's only right for me to help out in the kitchen. Oh, sir, your joke isn't funny at all. Auntie Oliver was undoubtedly a straightforward person. She quickly got busy at the counter again. We're so busy that we can't even handle it, but you're still saying such scary things. Odetta smiled politely. Mr. Feng, are you sure you can help? Don't force yourself. You're afraid that I'll cause trouble? Humph. Feng Bujue's eyes were covered by his fringe. In the shadow, a glint of savagery appeared in his eyes. Naive. Too naive. If I don't show you my skills, you won't understand. After he said that, even he himself was startled. Wait a minute, this line should be delivered by Jean Fugue. Oh well. Anyway. He picked up a kitchen knife, grabbed a piece of red meat and started to cut it at high speed. His hands were so fast that they left afterimages. The frequency of the knife falling on the chopping board was as dense as a typewriter. Ha 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 ha! Let me have a taste of this beautiful slaughter. The two ladies in the kitchen had never seen anything like this before. They were stunned and did not know what to do as they watched Brother Ju's performance. Another characteristic of Fong Bujue was that, when he cooked, he would become abnormally chunibu. If his usual chunibu, don't ask me what this means, I don't know either, it just appeared in my mind, was around 250, then when he cooked, his chunibu would explode to between 9527 and 10086. Habits are indeed scary things. After his parents died, Fong Bujue, who lived alone, naturally cooked often. He was not a person who pursued luxury and vanity, but when the conditions allowed, depending on how much money he had in his pocket, he would do his best to ensure the quality of his life. Therefore, this guy's cooking skills unknowingly improved. In the process, he developed the habit of talking to himself and doing all kinds of exaggerated actions when he cooked. First, put a layer of oil on the pan and heat it up. Fong Bujue said as he cooked. Cut the beef into thin slices and put them in a bowl. Add salt, pepper, soy sauce, mustard seeds, and rub them carefully. As he spoke, he picked up a stalk of celery and chopped it up like lightning. Put the beef liver, and celery together into a heated pan and stir-fry over high heat. He spent a few minutes to complete a side dish that looked and smelled delicious. Humph! The cooking skills of this dish with beef liver and celery with mustard is enough to convince you, Fong Bujue said proudly as he wiped his hands with a rag. Mrs. Odetta and Aunt Olivia were skeptical. They each took a piece of beef liver and tasted it. It was so delicious that it was unbelievable. Mr. Fong, were you a chef before you became a detective? Odetta asked in shock. Fong Bujue slowly walked to the side, took an apron from the wall, and put it on himself. He smiled smugly and said, "So, please leave the preparation of dinner to me. The two of you can help me a little." He paused for a moment. "And in the meantime, please answer a few of my questions." Chapter 400. By the way, there should be another servant in this house, right? As Fong Bujue spoke, he was concentrating on dripping oil into a bowl of sauce. Although his hands were busy cooking, his mind didn't stop at all. Multitasking wasn't a burden for Brother Ju at all. On the contrary, it was a kind of release. Previously, he had speculated that Olivia was not the only maid in the Lovecraft family. After all, there were so many rooms in the villa, as well as corridors, foyers, stairs, and so on. Even if it was just a superficial cleaning job, one person would have to do it for half a day. Not to mention, there were also chores like cooking and washing clothes to do. Even if Henderson and Barton were to be counted in, there wasn't enough manpower. Yes, there's another maid, Mrs. Marcia. She went back to her hometown for Thanksgiving this year, and will be back after the holiday, Mrs. Odetta replied. So even you have to come to the kitchen to help? Fong Bujue laughed. Odetta naturally understood the meaning behind his words. She replied awkwardly, "Sorry. I'm really not very good at these things." Fong Bujue only watched for a minute and knew that this madam's cooking skills could only be used as an assistant. Presumably, she rarely came to the kitchen to do anything. No. You're doing well. I think Mrs. Olivia is very grateful that you're here, Fong Bujue said. Isn't that so, Mr. Fong? These few days, Madam has really helped me a lot, Olivia added. The previous two madams didn't even bother to pour themselves a glass of water. Olivia! Odetta interrupted the auntie's words, gave her a look, and shook her head slightly. Obviously, she didn't want Olivia to continue. Presumably, this maid had a lot of complaints about the master's previous two madams and often complained, and these contents were not suitable for an outsider to hear. Olivia was also very tactful. Seeing that the madam had spoken, she quickly shut up and buried her head in her work. Humph! Fong Bujua sneered, picked up the bowl in front of him, and changed the topic. Look, carefully drip the oil in like this, and then pull it like a string to stir. This can prevent the oil from separating from the water. He put the bowl aside. In a while, pour this mixed sauce on the oysters. Then, my special baked oysters with spinach and cheese will be complete. You always surprise people, Mr. Fong. Odetta was also grateful that he didn't ask any more questions. She took the opportunity to compliment him. Who would have thought that a detective could be so good at cooking? This dish is only of medium difficulty. Brother Ju replied proudly. 4 dishes of similar difficulty. I plan to make 2 dishes of chicken liver mousse and Japanese filet mignon. He pointed to a pile of vegetables in the corner. Pick out a few old potatoes and deep fry them twice. You can make a unique pomme souffle. The Frenchman's stuff is pretty good. Oh! I say, Mr. Detective, how many dishes do you plan to make? Plus, I haven't heard of many of your dishes before, Olivia said from the side. Don't worry. I'll be able to make it in time if I do it myself. Fong Bujua did look relaxed and casual, but his movements were fast, accurate, and ruthless. He was at least twice as fast as those in TV cooking shows. At that moment, Brother Ju's thoughts were actually not that complicated. There were 2 main reasons he came to the kitchen. 1. He wanted to use the time before dinner to interrogate the last 2 suspects. 2. He wanted to have a good meal. In this scenario, the players needed to consume food and water. Since they had to eat, why not eat better? The game Thriller Paradise was very good at simulating the taste of food. Players who had bought food items from the market knew that from potato chips to steak, from candies to lobsters, the game could fully simulate the taste of the food. Now, he could use the resources in the scenario to enjoy the expensive food in real life for free and show off his cooking skills. Fong Bujua would not miss out on such a good opportunity. By the way, madam, I have a question that I don't think Officer Mark has asked you before. Fong Bujua suddenly asked without warning, who do you think is the biggest suspect in this case? Odetta's hands shook. She widened her eyes to look at Fong Bujua. The anxiety that she had suppressed in her eyes was replaced by surprise. Oliver also looked over with a worried expression on his face. After an awkward silence, Madame Odetta seemed to come to a decision, and her expression turned determined. It's me. Fong Bujua was still busy with his work. He replied calmly, and the reason is? Because my relationship with Dennis has never been good. What Odetta said was similar to what Barton had told his brother Ju earlier. 7 years ago, when I married into the Lovecraft family, Dennis strongly opposed it. Even though I tried to mend my relationship with him, his attitude toward me has always been cold. You saw it in the lobby today. What I want to hear is... Fong Bujua interrupted her. What I didn't see. Odetta's heart skipped a beat. Then, she seemed to understand something, and she sighed. Sigh, looks like I can't hide anything from you. Fong Bujua was saying, I was just bluffing. You really have something to tell me. Odetta continued. Fine. Before the body was found, I went to find Dennis. Before the man could say anything, she added. But I swear, I didn't kill Dennis. I didn't even go into that room. I believe you. Fong Bujua picked up a large handful of washed vegetables, spread them out in front of him, and cut them quickly. In my opinion, here's what happened this afternoon. Your husband and Dennis had an argument for some reason, and they even shot each other. As the mistress of this house, it's normal for you to be worried about this. At that time, you must have guessed that the reason for the argument was because of you. So, after a while, you went to Dennis's guest room and wanted to talk to him. His words were as rhythmic as the sound of a knife on a chopping board, and he spoke very quickly. In the end, you knocked on the door for a long time, but no one in the room answered, so you left. Unexpectedly, not long after, Dennis was found dead in the room. Since Dennis had always been on bad terms with you, and you happened to be in front of the guest room during the time of the crime, you were undoubtedly the prime suspect. You were afraid of being implicated, so you hid this matter for the time being. Chapter 401. Could it be that you saw me nearby? Mr. Fong, Odetta said in surprise. Her reaction showed that Brother Ju's speculation was exactly the same as the actual situation. Well, it's just a logical deduction. Fong Bujua replied, but he was complaining in his heart. Are you kidding me? In the previous conjectures, there were a lot of guesses that were correct. Now that I'm a little more serious, there are no deviations at all. There are still 8 chapters left. Why is this case so simple? Madam, you're too honest. Can't an NPC with your looks and temperament be a little more shrewd? Now that you've said this, isn't the reason why the murderer set up the secret room the same as exposing it? Next, as long as Barton's motive is revealed, the case will be closed. Barton, you're really useless. Who else can you fool other than Schofield? Speaking of which, even if Schofield worked on this case alone, he would still be able to solve it in the end, right? In the end, what's the point of my identity as a famous detective? Any other detective or police officer would have been able to solve this case as well. Is it really okay to continue like this? Due to the excessive amount of space, the crazy author has already started to describe me in all kinds of strange ways. Ever since this guy made up the setting of reading fetishes, reasoning fetishes, and being fearless more than 1,000,000 words ago, he put all his attention on the plot. From time to time, he would use the excuse of going out to collect materials to delay the writing progress. Now, he suddenly added the inexplicable attributes of incompetent weaving and chunibu cooking to make an extra 1,000 words. Although it seems to have enriched the character's personality, I feel like my own style and bottom line has been pulled down by him. Obviously, Fong Bujua didn't know that the main character, Wang Mao, who complained about me in the last official chapter, was still a virgin at the end of the chapter. Therefore, he shamelessly slandered me in his mind. Please don't mind him. Back to the main topic. Just then, the kitchen door was pushed open from the outside. Detective Schofield poked his head in and said when he saw Brother Ju, "Oh, Mr. Fong, you're really here." He paused. "Wow, are you cooking?" "Yes." Fong Bujua turned around and replied, "What's wrong? Have you never cooked in the kitchen before?" "Ah ha ha!" Schofield laughed. "My wife is very good at cooking. She almost never lets me into the kitchen." "Oh." Fong Bujua answered half-heartedly, but internally, he was grumbling, Hey, I was just asking. You could have just answered no directly. What is the meaning of that blissful smile? And you even said some unnecessary things. Oh, I'm just asking." With my deductive ability, the moment I saw your big belly and the ring on your left ring finger, I already guessed that your wife's cooking skills weren't bad. Your reaction right now clearly has the intention of mocking me, so it's because I acted too shamelessly that this guy is dissatisfied. If you don't like me, why don't you just say it directly? Please accept my righteous punch. Mr. Fong, it's not that hard to say something like that. Right, I'm here to tell you that Mrs. Carroll, Master Colston, Butler Henderson, Dr. Powell, Mr. Barton, Miss Nancy, and Jack have all gathered in the dining room, Schofield replied. Also, if you think it's okay, I want Carl and Mark to transport the bodies of the victims back to town first. You know. Although it's late autumn now, and the bodies are in body bags after a long time, the smell, wow. You're really loyal. You said the names of the 7 people one by one, and you immediately added an irrelevant topic to cover it up. Fong Bujue complimented. Okay, we'll do as you say. Brother Ju was still calm on the surface. Oh right, there's no need to keep an eye on the crime scene anymore. There's nothing else to investigate anyway. Understood, Schofield replied and prepared to leave. Just then, Feng Bujue seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He turned around and called out to Schofield, "Detective!" "What?" Schofield hurriedly stopped in his tracks. "You said you've been a criminal police officer in the big city for many years?" Feng Bujue asked. Schofield's expression changed slightly. "Yes, why?" "Then, at the police station in the big city, do you have any friends that you can trust?" Feng Bujue used a rather vague way of putting it. Schofield immediately understood what Brother Ju really meant. "Since you've been in the city for a long time, you must have some connections, right?" "Ha! I do have a few good old friends." Schofield put on a different expression. It was the expression he had when he first arrived at the villa, confident, courageous, and tough. "Excuse me," Feng Bujue said to the two ladies next to him. At the same time, he picked up a rag and wiped his hands as he walked to the kitchen door. When he reached Schofield, Brother Ju put one arm around his shoulder and opened the door with the other to lead him out. "I knew it. Detective, you're not an ordinary person," Feng Bujue said with a smile. "You flatter me." Schofield's pride was written all over his face. This was a compliment from a famous detective. For a detective, it was hard for him to control his sense of superiority at this moment. It was like Liang Chaowei walking up to an extra and saying, "You're really good at acting." "I'll be frank, detective. I already know who the murderer is." Feng Bujue lowered his voice and looked around the corridor. After making sure that no one was around, he whispered, "But we still lack some information right now, so we can't make a conclusion yet. But we have to find out his motive before we can get to the bottom of the case. So, we need your friend's help." "What do you mean?" Schofield asked. "I want you to make a call and contact your friends in the city's police department. See if anyone can help you look into the murderer's past," said Feng Bujue. "But that doesn't seem right," Schofield said. Feng Bujue smiled. "That's why we need reliable friends." Schofield hesitated for a few seconds before he smiled. "As expected of a famous detective. It seems that you know a lot about the gray areas in the police world." Of course, Feng Bujue said. "I know the usual tricks, like taking drugs from street gangsters and bringing them to the homes of scumbags who can't be convicted because there's insufficient evidence. Sprinkling the drugs behind the heater. I know that too." Chapter 402. In this chapter, the part that was framed by was Feng Bujue's complaint. The night was like a giant beast, swallowing up the city that was filled with a gothic atmosphere. The cold rain hit the puddles on the ground like sharp arrows, and the air was filled with a unique smell of the metropolis, desire. "Hey! What happened? Did you send the wrong script? What's with the opening? My name is Schofield, Greg Schofield, a police officer in Lane City's Major Crimes Division. I say, is this a new book with Detective Schofield as the main character? Is it from a first-person perspective? Driving through the city at night was like rowing a boat in a river of sin. This was a depraved place. Every brick on the wall and every inch of the ground was stained with the blood of the innocent. Robbing, fighting, slaughtering those beasts and devils in human skin ran amok everywhere, causing the kind and righteous people to be immersed in sorrow and pain. This was a war that would never end, and I was a warrior standing on the front line. My duty was to defend the boundaries of the law and wait for the dawn to come. What does this have to do with the case? Speaking of which, the author has already given up on life. That's why I said, if you want to write wherever you want, don't set a 33-chapter setting in advance. You're making it difficult for yourself. I couldn't remember how many times I drove alone on patrol. Ever since my partner died, I could see, hear, and feel the existence of danger. An intuition of foresight flowed in my blood and attached to my back. So, when I drove past 7th Street and saw the teenager standing in the middle of the road, looking at my headlights with a wooden face, I knew it was a trap. I broke a deal with a gang not long ago, and their revenge began. At this rate, this monologue from an old-school police movie will probably last for an entire chapter. The gang leader of this neighborhood was a complete villain. He was only 26 years old, but he had been in the gang for 17 years. When his peers were drawing finger pictures in elementary school, he was already killing people in the alleys with an Uzi. Of course, it wasn't entirely his fault. It was society that created monsters like him, and he created more and more monsters just like him. There was no need for test tubes, nutrients, or formulas. This sinful city itself was a furnace. The kids in the gangs were charged with murder, drug trafficking, robbery, and so on before they were 16 years old. I could arrest them. They would be sent to the police station, and the people from the juvenile delinquency department would take them away. But in the end, at some point next year, they would appear on the streets again, doing the same thing. Then what do you want to do? Step on the gas pedal and claim it was self-defense? I didn't hesitate and stepped on the gas pedal. Hey, what if you made a mistake? The kid dodged quickly, rolled to the side of the road, pulled out the pistol he had hidden in his pocket, and started shooting at me. His accomplices also poured out from the alleys on both sides, and intertwined their firepower around the police car. What kind of city were you a police officer in the past? Even the Gotham Major Crime Unit isn't that good. I lowered my head and stepped on the gas pedal. I tried to keep the car in the middle of the road to prevent it from crashing into something. I also quickly turned on the siren on the police car, but it didn't mean much. The surrounding gunshots were enough to attract other nearby patrol cars. The windows of the police car shattered, and at least 10 bullets entered the car. In those few seconds, it was like I had jumped into a fish tank filled with piranhas. I couldn't even tell how many bullets I had taken. Before I lost consciousness, the last thing I remembered was Captain Charlie dragging me out of the car. At that moment, I would never forget the expression on his face. I understood that he was really gay like the rumors said, and he had feelings for me. Hey, that's a lot of information. After half a month in the hospital, the doctor told me that I might not be able to return to my old job. So you moved to a remote town in the countryside to become a detective? When I first heard the news, I was devastated. But later, I slowly realized this was a sign from God. It was time to retreat from the front line of good and evil. I should have died on that street, but I didn't. Very few people get a second chance, but I got it, so I had to cherish it. So, I applied to be transferred away from the city. I brought my wife and daughter to a peaceful rural town and became a detective there. Before I left a letter for Captain Charlie. I still remember the content. Many things only become clear later, but I can't find my way anymore. Many things didn't feel bitter at the time, and even if they were bitter, I don't think I would have cared. That's just a song. Are you trying to express your regret that you didn't meet before you got married? In this small town, I was able to live a happy and peaceful life. Every day, I could go home on time and spend more time with my family. The police station here didn't have any major cases to deal with, and most of them were just family dispute. Compared to the city, this place was like a paradise. I often said to the rookie police officers here, back then, I was better than those tough detectives in the movies, until I was shot in the knee. Yeah. After all, that's the biggest weakness of the Earthlings. Over the years, I often thought of Captain Charlie, but I never contacted him, and he didn't reply to my letter. Hey, wait a minute. Don't tell me he's trying to use the case as an excuse to call Charlie. Today, I finally had an opportunity. In the process of investigating the Lovecraft family murder case, I met a well-known detective. He needed me to contact my former colleagues and go through an illegal process to check a suspect's file. Brother, I was wrong. Don't make this call. I don't know why, but my heart was full of anxiety, but also some anticipation. Most people feel like this before they embark on a forbidden path. Hey, what does this ellipsis mean? Is the content of the call prohibited for all ages? Speaking of which, this author must be crazy. This is far beyond the level of being rejected. Are you preparing to create some kind of new genre? Why couldn't he learn the skills of his peers? Don't mess around. Chapter 403. At 8 o'clock in the evening, in the mansion's dining room. Other than the maid, Oliver, the rest of the suspects were already seated on both sides of a long table. Officer Dempsey was guarding the door of the dining room. His posture seemed casual, but in fact, he was closely monitoring everyone in the room. The atmosphere in the dining room was very depressing, and there was little conversation. Everyone sat there, thinking about their own thoughts. Of course, this was normal. Under this roof, a cruel murder had just happened not long ago. Except for Feng Bujue, who could maintain a good mood. The moonlight tonight is beautiful, isn't it? Feng Bujue's figure appeared at the door, attracting everyone's attention. He seemed to be in high spirits, as if he was releasing a signal to everyone, hinting that he had found the real murderer. However, because of his previous behavior, the Lovecraft family did not have a good impression of this great detective. Although this fellow's reasoning was clear, convincing, vivid, and seemingly true, but in the end, his messy slander all had very obvious loopholes, and they were loopholes that ordinary people could see through with a single glance and refute with a single sentence. It's a pity that there is no mold. Otherwise, I would make a batch of mooncakes for dessert. Feng Bujue walked to the dining table as he spoke. There was a large paper bag under his arm, and it seemed to be filled with a lot of things. Auntie Oliver pushed a small trolley and followed behind Brother Jew into the restaurant. The cart had 3 floors, and it was full of dishes. Your kitchen here is really good, Mr. Lovecraft. Feng Bujue sat down across from his host and placed the paper bag that he was holding under his chair. I've been to some so-called high-end restaurants before. They have a luxurious facade, a luxurious dining environment, luxurious cutlery, and luxurious prices. But the kitchen was dirty and messy. It was filled with all kinds of buzzing and wriggling invertebrates, and the cooks were most likely spies sent by those animals to the humans because their only talent was to use their hands to make disgusting dark matter. If you want to start the conversation with a compliment, Colston looked at Brother Jew coldly and replied, just say the first sentence. There is no need to take the opportunity to share your unpleasant past with us. As they spoke, Oliver had pushed the cart to the dining table. Because the tableware had been set up beforehand, she began to serve the dishes. Henderson saw this, stood up from the chair, and walked to the cart. Let me help you, Oliver. No, sit down, Henderson. Jack quickly got up and walked over, pressing the old butler back into the chair. Let me do it. This second's young master was very nice to the servants, and he was too embarrassed to let the old man's help him with the dishes. Not long after, a plate of appetizers was placed in front of everyone. Feng Bujue obviously did not intend to be courteous with this family. Not only did he not stand up to help, but he also grabbed the half-empty bottle of red wine in the middle of the table and poured himself a glass. Dame de Travallo, 1985. Feng Bujue only took a sip before he picked up the bottle to examine it. Life is full of surprises. He had made a profit this time. In real life, this bottle of red wine could probably be exchanged for a gaming cabin. Why? Do you know that winery too? Mrs. Odetta said. Master likes it very much. Every year we order a batch of goods from there. I do know. Feng Bujue shrugged. It's just, my financial condition doesn't allow me to spend in bulk every year at a well-known winery in southeastern France. I'm afraid the only goods I can stock up on are toilet paper and carbonated drink. Oliver. Miss Nancy, who was on the other side of the table, suddenly spoke. Did you make this dish? She looked at the food on the plate in front of her with a puzzled expression. No, today's dishes were all made by Mr. Feng, Oliver replied, then pushed the cart to the kitchen to get the soup. Usually, she, Barton, and Henderson ate separately from the master and madam. Dr. Powell's home was in town, so he usually went back before evening. Therefore, it was rare for more than 10 people to gather at the same table for a meal like today. Oh! Nancy turned to Fong Bujue and said, I didn't know. You're so good at cooking. This charcoal grilled asparagus with salmon eggs is already at a professional level, right? Compared to a detective, I think you're more suited to be a chef. When the man was talking, Fong Bujue was pouring red wine into his glass. It looked like before he finished the wine, he did not plan to hand the bottle over to anyone else. There are many things that I can do. This is nothing. If you cook well, you'll be a beggar until you're old. Jack stuffed a piece of asparagus into his mouth. Judging from his attitude, he was obviously looking for trouble. There's my boogers in your plate. Fong Bujue only took a second to calmly say this extremely lethal sentence. Jack's expression changed abruptly. He coughed and choked. Haha, I'm kidding. Fong Bujue said 2 seconds later. The plates were placed randomly on the cart, and you were the one who assigned them. How is that possible? You. Jack wanted to curse, but there were elders and ladies at this table. He couldn't afford to lose his temper, so he could only wipe his mouth with a napkin and swallow his anger. See, my analytical skills are still very convincing, Fong Bujue said with a smile. That's enough, Mr. Fong, Colston said. Enough with the jesting. He stared at Brother Ju. You asked the police to restrict our freedom and claimed that you knew who the murderer was, but you refused to say it. He exhaled. Odetta said that you went to the kitchen to help more than an hour ago. I thought you were just using the excuse of helping to ask her and Oliver. I didn't expect you to really go and cook. What do you want to do? Haha, what do I want? Fong Bujue picked up his knife and fork and began to destroy the appetizer in front of him. You're asking the obvious, Mr. Lovecraft. He chewed on the asparagus and made a tisk-tsk sound. He didn't mind revealing the food in his mouth when he spoke. Everyone here is looking forward to a detective show, right? Don't worry, the famous detective Fong Bujue won't let you down. I'll give you a good show now. Chapter 404. Wait, Jack suddenly said. I've heard enough of your unreliable reasoning, he said, looking at Fong Bujue. Everyone here has been accused by you of being a murderer, right? He raised his arm and pointed. Before you accuse another innocent person, I want to ask you to explain how you're going to clear your name. How do we know that you're not using the name of a detective to help the police solve the case? Humph. Good question, Fong Bujue replied. Then he smiled but did not say anything, leaving Jack to the side. After a short silence, Brother Ju turned around and said to the 2 police officers, Detective Schofield, Officer Dempsey, sit down and eat. Look, I've prepared your share. Isn't it already on the table? This. Schofield and Dempsey looked at each other. The 2 of them were indeed hungry, and there were still several empty seats at the long table. After hesitating for a few seconds, they sat down. Hey! Don't change the subject. You have to answer my question, Jack said again. That's right, Colston said. I also want to ask you, where are you from? How can you prove that you're not the murderer? Previously, in the study, you spoke ill of me and avoided my question. Now, in front of everyone, can you please make it clear? Just as the atmosphere was about to explode, Aunt Oliver returned from the kitchen. This time, she brought soup. At this juncture, no one stood up to help. Every pair of eyes at the table turned to look at Fong Bujue, waiting for his response. Brother Ju took the soup bowl from Aunt Oliver and said, It seems that you still don't understand the meaning of my questions. It's okay, I'll demonstrate it again. Then, he began a shocking statement. I think the murderer who killed Dennis Lovecraft is me, Fong Bujue. The way he said this line was exactly the same as when he was talking about other people. Hey, is he schizophrenic? Why don't I find it strange at all? Schofield thought to himself. The other people at the table had the same thought as him. Even Auntie Oliver, who was serving the soup, stopped what she was doing and looked at Brother Jew like he was crazy. Miss Oliver, the soup won't taste good if it gets cold. Fong Bujua turned his head and said, Don't mind what I'm saying. Just continue serving the dishes. Okay, Oliver replied stiffly. As for the motive, Fong Bujue gently stirred the soup in front of him and continued, maybe someone asked him to do it. He tasted the Marseille's fish soup in the bowl. The taste of the Mediterranean Sea is dancing on the tip of my tongue. Huff! He blew off some of the steam and drank a few more spoonfuls. Mr. Fong. Schofield couldn't turn a deaf ear to these words. You're joking, right? It's very interesting, isn't it? Fong Bujua laughed. If a person uses an unusually calm tone and says something that is extremely unfavorable to him, others will be confused. He paused for a moment. Detective, you already know who the murderer is, don't you? Please don't doubt the conclusion that has already been made just because of a few words from me. Okay, Schofield replied. He wiped his sweat with a napkin and thought to himself, indeed, when Mr. Fong is talking nonsense, he always looks nonchalant. From his expression and tone, it's impossible to tell whether he's telling the truth or not. The famous detective is indeed amazing. He can mix truth with lies, and he's so unpredictable. Where was I? Oh, right, motive. Fong Bujue continued, there's one thing that can't be denied no matter what, and that is that Dennis and I have never crossed paths in our lives before today. Even if we investigate this point repeatedly, the result won't change. So, there are a few possible motives for me to kill someone. First, Dennis and I were enemies the moment we met, and I didn't like him for no reason. He was kind enough to let me hitch a ride, but I secretly had the intention to kill him. I wanted to put him to death. He ate a few more mouthfuls of the food in the soup and continued, Second, I'm a psychopathic murderer. There's basically no reason for me to kill. It's just out of interest and pleasure, or I just treat it as an after-dinner activity. He looked up and glanced at everyone, and was very satisfied with their expressions. It seems that the first two reasons are not very convincing, but the possibility of the third one seems to be higher. Fong Bujua leaned back in his chair and spread his hands. Maybe I'm a professional killer. He pointed at the dishes on the table with the spoon in his hand. As you can see, I'm a man of many talents. Compared to a chef, the professional relationship between a killer and a detective seems to be stronger, isn't it? He smiled. As long as the physical condition allows, an excellent detective can also become an excellent criminal. Although I personally prefer a position like a criminal consultant, a professional killer. Why not? Yeah, it's pretty cool. Miss Nancy suddenly added. Obviously, she already understood what Fong Bujua was doing. So, if they wanted to talk nonsense, they could talk nonsense together. Heh! Fong Bujua smiled at her and continued, So, as a professional killer, I took action. I investigated Dennis's whereabouts in advance, and ambushed him in the mountains, on the road he had to pass. What do you think of the plan of putting some obstacles in the middle of the road, and when he stopped the car, wearing a mask and rushing out to shoot him? No, I won't do that. I decided to pretend to be a car accident victim, and take action when I got close. Then what do you think I should do? Wear a fake beard or something to disguise myself, and hide a gun in my pocket. When he came out of the car to talk to me, I would shoot him directly on the road. Then I would be too weak, and it would be an insult to the name of my profession. I had to follow him to this villa. In a place with many eyes, I had to let as many people see my face and remember my name. Then, I had to find an opportunity to— Enough! Colston interrupted. Your point of view is very clear. You don't have to continue. You are the ones who interrupted me, and you are the ones who can't listen anymore. Feng Bujue glanced at Jack maliciously. Originally, I could have finished talking when the raspberry oil vinegar sesame leaf salad and fried bacon tender chicken rolls with pureed figs were served. But now, I guess I won't be able to finish by the time dessert is served. On the surface, Brother Ju was arrogantly opposing the father and son pair, but in fact, he was very grateful to them. Sure enough, it's impossible to live without a few enemies. Thank you for helping me with another chapter, he thought to himself. Chapter 405. When the fragrant Kelly lamb stewed with fennel was served, Feng Bujue bent down slightly, picked up the paper bag under the chair, and took out a rather large envelope. You should recognize this envelope, right, Mr. Lovecraft? Feng Bujue said to Colston. The latter hesitated for 2 seconds before he was shocked. In an instant, his expression changed from shock to anger. You thief! You're blatantly stealing! He stood up agitatedly and pointed at Feng Bujue. He turned to Detective Schofield and yelled, "Arrest him! Officer! What's going on?" Schofield couldn't figure out the situation for a moment because he didn't know what was in Brother Ju's paper bag. About 40 minutes ago, the detective had contacted one of his former colleagues, who was still working in a police department in a big city, and had readily agreed to help Schofield. 20 minutes later, the detective called again, and the other party had already obtained information about Barton the gardener from the archives and faxed it. After the 1980s, as standardization and technology matured, fax machines rapidly developed and became popular, and people like Lovecraft naturally had their own fax machines. The detective didn't know where Feng Bujue had gone between when he received the fax and when he appeared at the door of the restaurant just now. It's a very simple matter, Feng Bujue said. I just snuck into Mr. Lovecraft's room and stole this will from his safe. What? This time, everyone at the table was shocked. You? This? Schofield was at a loss. Furthermore, I've already taken a look at it. Feng Bujue used a light tone to add, Look, the seal has already been torn open. He even showed it to everyone. Don't worry, I think Master Colston's lawyer still has a stack of identical copies. Things like wills are usually made in 2 or even 3 copies. It doesn't matter even if I burn the copy in my hand. If old Master Colston was said to be a burning fire, then Feng Bujue's words, attitude, and actions were like firewood, gasoline, and liquefied gas. If Feng Bujue was 20 years younger, he would have already jumped on the table and run over to kick him. I saw something interesting. Feng Bujue put the will on the table, picked up the knife and fork, and continued to eat the mutton. Mr. Feng. Schofield suddenly stood up and took out a pair of handcuffs from his waist. You should know that your actions, it's theft. Feng Bujue interrupted. Of course I know. Don't worry, detective. Since I took it out, it's equivalent to admitting guilt, isn't it? He looked completely indifferent. Do I look like I'm running away? When I'm done with this murder, you can handcuff me and take me to the police station in town overnight. No. You have to arrest him now. Officer, why do you have to listen to a thief? Colston, with a cry of desperation, rose from his seat with the aid of his crutch, and walked with all his might round the long table and along its head. Ha ha! What do you want to do? Take back the will and knock me out with your crutches while you're at it? Do you think this will stop me from revealing the contents? Feng Bujue sat down calmly, and his expression was relaxed. It was as if the old man who was charging at him was not a threat at all. Schofield stopped him and said to Colston, who was approaching, Sir, please don't be rash. Violence is not allowed. Sit down. Suddenly, Feng Bujue roared. At this moment, his tone and demeanor instantly changed. He took out a pistol from the paper bag beside him at lightning speed, raised it, and aimed. His movements were so practiced and fast that it was hard to believe that he was a good citizen. Brother Jew's gun was not pointed at Colston, but at someone else. A person who stood up quietly and tried to approach from the side. Barton. I know you're good at fighting. At that moment, Fong Bujua's expression was resolute and cold. He looked straight at his target. But my shooting skills are not bad. The expression on Barton's face changed several times. The cowardly, kind, and fussy gardener disappeared in just a few seconds. What replaced him was a man who was cold, patient, and unfathomable. On his face, there was another person's shadow. That person was the owner of the villa. Colston. Officer, do you have a gun with you? Fong Bujua stared at Barton and opened his lips to ask. Mr. Fong. Before things get out of hand, I advise you. Schofield did not finish his sentence. Fong Bujua interrupted. If you don't have one, use mine. At that moment, Schofield recovered from his initial shock and understood the situation. He composed himself, quickly walked forward, and took the gun in Fong Bujua's hand. Then, he raised the gun with both hands, aimed at Barton, and ordered loudly, Demuty, handcuff Mr. Barton. Yes, yes. Demuty was stunned for a moment, but he still did as he was told. Although he did not understand the situation in front of him, he should listen to his superior's orders. When Barton was handcuffed, Colston broke down. He sat on the ground, as if he had aged 10 years in an instant. His soulless eyes frightened his family. Odetta, Jack, and Nancy ran over and surrounded Colston, trying to help him. At this point, should I call you John Barton? Fong Bujua asked, or John Lovecraft? As soon as he said that, everyone in the room looked at Barton, including Oliver, who happened to be pushing the cart in. Everyone froze. The changes in the past few minutes and Fong Bujua's words seemed to have revealed everything. When did you start suspecting me? Barton asked in a deep voice. When will it be? Seeing that the situation was under control, Fong Bujua picked up the fork and knife again and started to move the food into his mouth. On the lawn outside the bungalow, when I'm investigating with the police. Did I leave any traces outside Dennis's guest room window? Barton asked. No, it has nothing to do with that. Fong Bujua said. I was convinced that you were the murderer after I saw the tree outside Master Colston's house. You? Barton was stunned. Ha, 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 ha 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 ha. He laughed, then continued, I underestimated you. You could even notice that kind of detail. Ah, of course. Fong Bujua replied coldly, and when I listed you as a key suspect, the flaws in your clumsy performance in front of me earlier were revealed one by one. He shook his head. Painting a snake with legs and digging your own grave is the most appropriate way to describe you in this case. Chapter 406. You. What are you talking about? Mrs. Carroll seemed to have understood what was going on. She looked at Barton in shock. Was it you? Mr. Barton, did you kill Dennis? Why? She was about to rush forward. Dr. Powell, who was closest to her, quickly stopped her. Don't go over there, Carroll. He's a murderer. Humph. Why? Barton raised his head and looked at Caroline with a compassionate gaze. Pitiful woman. You're worthy of my sympathy in every sense. Perhaps you'll thank me after you understand the truth. Mr. Fong, can you explain what's going on? Miss Nancy, who was kneeling next to her father, asked. It's a long story. Fong Bujua was ready to tell a story. First, let me introduce Mr. Barton in front of you. He put down the knife and fork in his hand, wiped his mouth, and pointed. He is the eldest son of Mr. Colston Lovecraft. Except for Fong Bujua and Detective Schofield, everyone else in the room looked surprised. Even though Fong Bujua had already mentioned the name John Lovecraft earlier, when he officially revealed his identity, it still gave everyone quite a shock. Stop it! Colston sat on the ground and shouted. I plead guilty. I was the one who killed Dennis. Arrest me, officer. I plead guilty. This isn't a medieval religious court, Mr. Lovecraft, Fong Bujua said coldly. This is a country with a sound legal system. Convictions are based on evidence. He shrugged. Even if it's the mafia, before finding someone to take the blame and commit perjury, they have to ask for the opinion of a lawyer before taking action. He looked down at the old man who was on the verge of despair. Do you think what you're doing now is noble and noble? In my opinion, even if you really take the blame, you're not taking it on behalf of others. Today's situation is entirely your own doing. Don't go too far. Jack couldn't stand it anymore. He already understood what Fong Bujua meant. He said loudly, "Are you trying to say that Barton is my father's illegitimate son? So what if he was? My father didn't kill him. He just lost a son, and now he's about to lose another. It's normal for him to have such a reaction. Can't you be a little benevolent?" Fong Bujua laughed. "Are you sure Dennis is your brother?" He paused and suddenly turned to Henderson. "Or, are you sure that Dennis is the son of the Lovecraft family?" As soon as he said this, everyone in the room turned to look at Henderson. The steward's face was pale and his whole body was trembling. Even though he was sitting on a chair, he gave people the feeling that he was about to fall. As an outsider, Schofield couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The rich circle is really messy. I don't know how much you know about genetics, but I think Dr. Powell should know a little. As Fong Bujua spoke, he took out 2 photos from the paper bag. "I found these 2 photos in the safe in Colston's room." Officer Dempsey couldn't help but interrupt. "Mr. Fong, I can understand that the door of the room wasn't locked, but something like a safe. How did you open it?" "Oh, that safe used a mechanical lock. I could open it with a stethoscope," Fong Bujua replied casually. "Hey, wait, stethoscope." Powell's mouth twitched. He had a bad feeling. Yes, I took it from your room," Fong Bujua said with a smile. "Doctor, your reasoning skills are not bad. With your ability, it's a waste that you don't become a thief." Powell muttered gloomily. "Okay, let's go back to the photos." Fong Bujua raised the photos in his hand and showed them to everyone. "These 2 photos are of Colston and his 2 wives." He paused for a moment. "We can see that his first 2 wives, one has red hair and the other has black hair." He turned the photos over and put them in front of his eyes. "I have to say, your life is always accompanied by beautiful women, Mr. Lovecraft. It's a pity that the women who married you all had unlucky lives and died young." He paused for a second and looked up at Mrs. Odetta. "Don't mind it, madam. I'm just saying." Fong Bujua then turned his gaze to Jack and Nancy. "Master Jack and Miss Nancy both have blonde hair, just like their father when he was young." He then pointed at the woman in the first photo. "Factoring in the possibility of recessive genes, how likely is it that the child of Colston and his first wife has brown hair?" He licked his lips. "If hair color is not enough to explain the problem, then combined with dominant genetic factors such as double eyelids and chin cleft, who does Dennis resemble more?" He turned his head and looked at the butler. "Mr. Henderson, although your hair is white, from your face, eye color, cheekbones, and other characteristics, you seem to have some Latino or Germanic characteristics." "Yes, Dennis is my son, my first wife and I." Henderson interrupted Brother Jew but couldn't finish the sentence. Halfway through, he gritted his teeth and lowered his head. "Henderson, you..." Jack had a good relationship with this butler since he was young, but he never thought that this man had an affair with his mother. "It's really a delightful scene, isn't it? Ha ha." Fong Bujua was the only person in the room who could still laugh. A rich man, with a beautiful wife at home, still had an affair outside, and even had a child with his lover. He put the photo back into the paper bag. So, his legal wife used similar means to retaliate against her husband. Brother Ju stood up and paced in the spacious dining room, probably treating it as an after-dinner stroll. And the foreshadowing of all the tragedies was buried 40 years ago. He reached out and gestured to a chair next to him. You'd better help Mr. Lovecraft to the chair. You can't sit on the ground with him and listen to me, can you? Odetta, Jack, and Nancy had fallen into a state of confusion. They were far from recovering from the shock, so they just followed Fong Bujue's suggestion. A moment later, when Colston sat down again, Fong Bujue took out a few pieces of fax paper from the paper bag and read it in his hand. After figuring out the relationship between these people, the next explanation is simple. Let's start with Mr. Barton. Chapter 407. I remember you once told me this. Fong Bujue looked at Barton and repeated. You said, when I was young, I too had a bright future. But you didn't mention a single word about the details of the future. On the contrary, you described your experience in prison vividly. He turned around and continued to pace. At the time I was confused. Theoretically speaking, people are more willing to talk about those glorious and beautiful memories, but you, just as we were about to talk about this topic, you avoided it. Brother Ju shook the fax paper in his hand and said, and after I got this, I understood everything. It was not that you did not want to talk about it, but you could not. He paused. Your bright future when you were young was closely related to your father. Fong Bujue turned to face the group. As he walked, he said, when Mr. Barton was 7, his mother committed suicide due to depression. I think if that lady could have held on for a few more years, perhaps she would have become the second mistress of this family, and John would have been able to take on his father's surname. Unfortunately, there are no ifs in this world. We can imagine Ms. Barton's situation at the time. Year after year, she waited for the man she loved to give her a status, but the man had no intention of divorcing her. He even had a second child with his first wife. When she brought her son to register for school, the child asked her, "Why are the other students accompanied by their father and mother?" She could not answer. She could not even explain to her son why he had to take on her surname. But she did not have the ability to leave that man. She was just a lowly mistress. All she could do was wait, cry, and silently protest in the depths of her heart. Therefore, in the winter of that year, she chose to end her life to be free and to occupy a place in that man's heart forever. Colston, who was sitting on the chair by the wall, covered his face with his hands and buried his proud head deeply. Later, the guilty father sent the illegitimate child to a boarding school overseas. Fong Bujue continued. He kept the child far away from him and took care of him like he took care of his mother. The child grew up day by day. He learned to be independent very early on. He was very outstanding in all aspects and had a far more mature personality than his peers. But in his heart, he always harbored hatred. He did not thank his father for everything he had given him. In his opinion, he deserved it. His mother used her life to exchange for it. In the end, his father only wanted to use money to atone for his sins and did not give him any affection. Therefore, at an appropriate age, the rebellious nature in young Barton's bones finally broke out. A highly educated young man with an outstanding appearance and boundless prospects became a great bandit. Fong Bujue pointed at Barton with his palm facing up. Everyone, please pay attention to my words, thief. He curled his lips. Although Mr. Barton himself told me that he was just a burglar who picked locks and spent 2 years in prison in Pentonville at the age of 30. According to the file in my hands, he's definitely not a second-rate or third-rate thief. He's the kind of top expert who can be ranked as Arhut 11, a film made by Louis Mirestone in 1960 and remade by Steven Soderbergh in 2001 with the same name. Thank you for the compliment, Barton replied coldly. You're welcome. Fong Bujue looked at Barton and replied naturally. He continued, as for the time you spent in prison. It wasn't 2 years, but 10 years, a full 10 years. He let out a long sigh. You were sent to prison when you were in your 20s, and you only served your sentence 8 years ago. You have no job and no friends. Your father knows this, and as your only family in this world, he took you in. But his lawful children are of age, and he cannot take a stranger home and say, as if nothing had happened, "Hey, you're a stranger. Come and meet your half-brother, who just got out of prison." So, your identity became the gardener here. When Feng Bujue said this, he happened to walk to the window. He stopped and was silent for a moment, as if to give the people behind him some time to think. Not long after, Feng Bujue spoke again. He looked at the night sky outside the window and sighed. The moon tonight is really beautiful. The others in the restaurant were not in the mood to admire the moon. They had mixed feelings and did not know how to face this sudden change. Then, let's talk about this will. Feng Bujue turned around. As I said, I've already read it. It's because of that I'm basically convinced. Dennis is not Colston's son. Isn't Dennis's name on that will? Schofield followed Brother Ju's train of thought and asked. Of course. Feng Bujue pointed to Colston by the wall. Mr. Lovecraft has always been very good to his family. For example, Master Jack and Miss Nancy. No matter what their life choices were, Master Colston supported them as much as possible. He was never stingy with money and patience. He tilted his head. If Jack was my son, he might have starved to death in the first year of chasing his dream. Hey! Exclaimed Jack crossly. Ha ha! Feng Bujue laughed. But, how does this master treat others? He turned to Henderson again. The man who cheated with his wife is nearly 70 years old. He is still his servant and even does heavy manual labor. Is this just a coincidence? Dennis's name is not on the will. Did he forget to write it? You know. Nancy immediately understood, and then looked at her father in surprise. Yes, I've always known. Colston replied in a hoarse voice. I knew soon after Dennis was born, but I never told his mother or Henderson about it. Henderson, who blamed himself, spent the rest of his life atoning for his sins. Even though his body was no longer competent for the job of housekeeper, he still didn't want to retire. He just wanted to work in this villa, in the place where the lady and his son lived until the day he died. Feng Bujue continued. Colston's dignity was trampled on, and he couldn't let it go. Therefore, he didn't stop Henderson. Phew! Brother Ju let out a long sigh. After reading the will, I understood why Henderson fainted when he saw the body. Because the one who died was his son. I'm sorry, Henderson. Barton turned his head and said to Henderson, I have no grudge against you, but I had to do it. Henderson didn't respond. He just sat at the table in silence, his face still as pale as a sheet. Yes, you had to do it. Feng Bujue continued, because this afternoon, you heard the conversation between Colston and Dennis in the room on the second floor. He walked back to the table and stuffed the things in his hands back into the paper bag. Of course, you wouldn't stand in the corridor and stick to the door to eavesdrop. That would be too easy to be discovered. So, you went to the utility room to get a pair of pliers and a ladder, came out of the house, and climbed to a tree closest to the room to eavesdrop. This way, even if someone saw you, you could immediately pretend to be doing trimming work. Brother Ju picked up the last bit of red wine on the table and poured it all into a goblet. However, the height that a ladder can reach, or the height that an ordinary person can climb, is still quite a distance away from the window on the second floor. In other words, even if an ordinary person climbed a tree, they wouldn't be able to hear the conversation in the room. Unless it's someone with special skills, Schofield said. Schofield added. He had also seen Barton's file and knew a thing or two about his abilities. You climbed to a high branch where only a cat can stay and used your superior hearing to successfully eavesdrop on the conversation in the room. Fong Bujua said. Obviously, the reason why Dennis and Master Colston quarreled was not because Colston wanted to remove Mrs. Odetta's name from the will. He picked up the wine glass and took a sip. Instead, he wanted Colston to remove everyone's name from the will and then add only one name: Dennis Lovecraft. Jack, Nancy, and Odetta, the three direct heirs, suddenly changed their expressions when they heard this. I think Dennis must have used some means, such as bribing Colston's lawyer, to learn the contents of the will. Fong Bujua continued. Then, as long as he spent money to hire a few private detectives to follow the clues, it would be easy to find out Barton's true identity. He downed the wine in his glass. A lover who committed suicide, an illegitimate son who was in prison, a rich man who had several marriages. If this story was given to the tabloids, it wouldn't be a problem for them to run it for half a year. Dennis undoubtedly used this to intimidate Master Colston and make him submit. No, you're talking nonsense. My Dennis wouldn't do that. Why would he force father to this point? What's an inheritance? He already married me, our family, Carol said agitatedly. Fong Bujua interrupted her. You are indeed very sad. Carol's eyes widened, tears glistening in her eyes. She seemed to have realized something, but she still couldn't accept it. Dennis must have known long ago that he's not Mr. Lovecraft's biological son. Fong Bujua said. This was undoubtedly told to him by his mother before she passed away, which means he knew it when he was still a child. He must have secretly hated his biological father and his birth, so he was very cold to Henderson. He was also very cold to his younger brother and sister. He married a wife who was from a higher family than the Lovecraft family to leave himself a way out. He would have checked Colston's will, first, because he knew his identity, and second, because he knew the old man's character. Dennis had no feelings for Colston, his nominal father. The inferiority he buried in his heart was far more than anyone else in this room. When he found out that the name Barton, pardon my choice of words, the bastard's name appeared in the will, and he, who had been someone else's son for decades, didn't get a single cent, it was normal for him to do something like that. Chapter 408. In summary, Mr. Barton's, or rather, Mr. John Lovecraft's, motive for the crime is clear. Fong Bujua looked at Jack and Nancy and said, Your brother's temperament, ability, and experience are stronger than the two of you and Dennis combined. When he was in his 20s, he was already a godly thief with extraordinary skills. After 10 years in prison, he undoubtedly became an even more ruthless person. Today, he's patient, determined, and secretive. When such a person makes up his mind to kill someone, his execution is astonishing. Something that an ordinary person would have to prepare and hesitate for at least a few days. He could do it immediately. So, Mr. Barton had already taken action before he got down from the branch. He immediately used the pliers in his hand to cut off an iron wire tied to a branch, commonly used in landscape design to make trees grow in a predetermined shape, which was the murder weapon, and took it back to the house. Fong Bujua leaned back in his chair and raised his head. After the gunshot incident, Barton took advantage of the moment when Dennis was alone in the room and knocked on the door. Dennis didn't know that his threatening conversation had been overheard. He thought that Barton was still in the dark. Barton naturally pretended that he didn't know anything. He only said that he had entered the house to do some chores, such as removing insects from the bonsai in the corner. In that case, even if Mr. Barton was wearing gloves when he entered the house, Dennis wouldn't have found it strange, Schofield continued. This detective, who had accompanied Brother Jew throughout his investigation and reasoning, had a certain level of detective ability. At the very least, he hadn't forgotten the details of the case. Very correct, detective. Fong Bujua nodded and said. Thus, the scene of Dennis smoking on the sofa and Barton busying himself in his blind spot appeared. Then, the next scene was a murder. He looked at Barton. Just like how you stood up silently and tried to approach me. When the crime happened, you quietly and quickly approached Dennis from behind and strangled him with the weapon in your pocket. Everything was going smoothly, but just as you were about to escape, someone knocked on the door of the room. Mrs. Odetta was worried that the focus of her husband and Dennis's argument was her, so she wanted to talk to the latter. She didn't know that a murder had happened in the guest room in front of her. Humph! Fong Bujua sneered and continued to say to Barton, as I've always emphasized, you're not an ordinary person. Mr. Barton, you're very good. An ordinary person might have been rash in such a situation, but you were as calm as ever and came up with a plan. The door of the guest room was locked at the time, so you weren't worried that Odetta would find you. You just had to keep quiet and escape through the window. But that wasn't enough for you. Since there was a murder, there had to be a murderer, and Mrs. Odetta was the perfect scapegoat. She had the motive and the ability to commit the crime. The key was, she was indeed at the scene when the murder happened. Fong Bujua tilted his head and smiled. I remember everything you said, Mr. Barton. He repeated, I'm about the same age as young Master Dennis. Actually, I understand him. If I had a rich father and wanted to marry a stepmother who was 5 or 6 years younger than me, I'd be against it too. He smiled again. Obviously, you said that from the bottom of your heart. You came to this mansion 8 years ago, and Mrs. Odetta married into the Lovecraft family 7 years ago. I think, back then, you and Dennis must have had the same attitude. Both of you strongly opposed the marriage between your father and Odetta, but one was in the light and the other was in the dark. There's no doubt that you want Colston's inheritance more than Dennis, don't you? Because he owed you, his indifference caused the death of your mother, and his alienation and denial of you led you astray. Even though you finally came to this house many years later, you were still a gardener, not the owner of this place. Then, at least after his death, let him repay you with his family's property. Now that Dennis is dead, if Mrs. Odetta is convicted of murder, then in a few years, when Colston's 2 legs are gone and the contents of his will are made public, you, John Lovecraft, can inherit most of his family's property and become the head of this family. What a dangerous guy! When Schofield heard this, he couldn't help but turn to stare at Barton's face and mutter. Fong Bujua turned back and said to everyone, so? Mr. Barton didn't plan to escape through the window, but because there was someone outside the door, he did it on the spur of the moment. He used wire to lock the window and set up a secret room so that he could have a backup plan, because he knew that a case like this would be difficult to solve in a short period of time with the police force of a small town. As long as he could confuse the public for the time being, there would be plenty of opportunities to frame him later. For example, making a key and throwing it in the corner of Mrs. Odetta's room. It would be a piece of cake for him. Brother Jew paused for a moment and continued, after the murder, Barton disposed of the murder weapon and quickly returned to the villa. If it were anyone else, they would have most likely returned to their room and waited anxiously for the body to be found. But he came to my room as fast as he could and wittily put on a rather interesting performance in front of me. Those words were half true and half false and were quite deceptive. The only thing I didn't understand at the time was, what was the point of him telling me all this? Was it really so that I, an outsider, could persuade this family not to do anything stupid? But not long after the crime, I understood his intentions. Before the body was found, Barton imperceptibly instilled an idea in my mind. If there was anyone who would kill Dennis, it would definitely be Mrs. Odetta. He was indeed very clever, because when he fabricated the conversation between Colston and Dennis, he made it sound like Dennis was going to kill Odetta. The actual situation was the opposite, but it seemed logical. Ha! Fong Bujua chuckled coldly before turning his gaze back to Barton. Because I said in the corridor, at the very least, I am a detective, you purposely came up with this trick after you committed the crime. Your idea was, Even if your words didn't mislead me, it didn't matter. Anyway, when the body was found, you were with me, the detective. From a psychological point of view, it was very likely that I directly excluded you from the list of suspects. Phew! Barton sighed deeply. Now that I think about it, coming to you was a huge mistake. He smiled bitterly. I underestimated you. From your life experience, you must have thought highly of yourself. You wouldn't take a normal detective seriously at all. Fong Bujua smiled. Using this so-called detective to achieve your goal. This kind of extremely ironic and interesting thing, if it were me, I would also try it. Brother Ju stood up and stretched. Actually, if you had done it in a different way and on a different day, making it look like a suicide or an accident, you might have succeeded. He yawned. I really want to tell you to keep up the good work, but you're a first-degree murderer, and you're going to jail for the second time. Even if you don't get the death penalty, you won't have the chance to get out in this life. I can only give you my most sincere wishes, and hope that you can successfully escape prison one day. Mr. Fong, the police are here. You can't just say successfully escape prison like that, Schofield said as he wiped his sweat. You're just saying escape prison like that? Fong Bujua said. Are you forcing me to mock your name? After Fong Bujua said this casually, he walked towards Barton without warning and leaned over to whisper something in his ear. Other than Barton, no one else heard what Brother Ju said. After that, Fong Bujua turned around and walked towards the door, laughing as he walked. A malicious laugh. Where are you going? Jack asked. I'm going to the toilet, can't I? Fong Bujua leaned forward and replied in an arrogant tone. If someone still wants to arrest me for theft when I return, then put the handcuffs on me. Of course, Brother Ju didn't really want to go to the toilet. He heard the system prompt and wanted to find a place where no one was around to teleport. It was another late autumn. There was no green left on the gray wasteland, and it was empty under the sky. In this place where the forest and the mountains intersected, the roads and telephone poles seemed out of place. My name is Schofield, Drake Schofield, the sheriff of a remote town. The bright moonlight shone on the ground, illuminating the road ahead. Driving in such a scenery always brought back some memories. A few years ago at this time, I went to the Lovecraft mansion in the mountains to solve a murder case. A detective, in less than half a day, solved the puzzle and found the real murderer. The strange thing was that I mistook him for another famous detective, but when I saw the picture of the famous detective in the newspaper, I realized that they were not the same person. Later, reports about this murder case did not appear in any mainstream media. Even Dennis Lovecraft's obituary was not published in any newspaper. It seemed that some big shot took action and suppressed the matter in a low-key way. In April of the next year, John Lovecraft, was sentenced to death by the Supreme Court. His father, Old Master Colston, died suddenly in a hotel room 2 weeks before the verdict. The cause of death was still a mystery. In the end, 80% of the Lovecraft family's property was divided equally between the second son, Jack, and the third daughter, Nancy. It was said that Jack used his money to open a large record company in the United States. Their advertising slogan was thought-provoking: to support young, ambitious musicians. The remaining 20% of the property, as well as the real estate, was inherited by Mrs. Odetta, Colston's third wife. Mrs. Odetta donated the property in the mountains to the government after her husband's death. It was said that she had now moved to a winery in southeastern France. Butler Henderson, who had served the Lovecraft family for many years, family Dr. Powell, maids Oliver and Martha, including the lawyer who handled the will, did not receive a penny. Obviously, my judgment of Colston being humane was wrong. He was a selfish, hypocritical bastard. Fortunately, his daughter did not inherit his bad qualities. A month after her father's death, Miss Nancy took the initiative to give these people the severance pay they deserve. As for the strange detective, I never saw him again. His back when he walked out of the restaurant that day was still vivid in my mind, but it was as if he disappeared around the corner outside the door and never came back. After that, I tried to find out more information about this person, but I found nothing. He was like a ghost that did not exist in this world at all. There were many strange legends in the land in front of me. Maybe he was one of them. March 1986, the capital of Aseri, Ryan City No. 1 Detention Center. On a hazy afternoon, Barton, wearing a prison uniform, handcuffs, and shackles, was brought to the interview room by a prison guard. Across the glass in front of him sat a woman in luxurious clothes. The two of them picked up their phones and were silent for a few seconds. Then, Barton spoke first. "Long time no see, Carol." Carol did not respond. She was wearing a big hat with the brim pulled low, and there was a veil in front of the brim. "It seems that you have found out. Now you should understand why I said, 'You will thank me.'" Barton sneered. "In a sense, he is really like Colston. I investigated him a few years ago, and I knew at that time that he would sooner or later kill you, a sad woman, and use the family property he inherited from you to live with his lover." Barton said in a deep voice, "Even if it's not for myself, I don't regret killing that kind of man at all." "What you asked?" Carol's voice was also very cold. She was like a walking corpse. "Someone has already done it, and there will be a result soon." "Thank you." Barton smiled. "Is it really necessary to go to this extent?" Carol asked. "He is still your father, and with his physical condition, he doesn't have many years left to live, right? This has nothing to do with you." Barton said this and suddenly laughed. "You are a very good person, Carol. There are some things that people like you will never understand." He paused for a moment. "But there are also some people who are not so kind. They will say, 'Since you can't enjoy his property as compensation, why don't you let him give you something else?'" After Barton said this, he hung up the phone and laughed crazily. Chapter 409. Fong Bujue raised his head to howl in the storage room. "Scam! Father!" After half a month, the sound of his screams reverberated in his mind. "What the hell is this? Didn't the game description say that the combination of the puzzle cards would be at least excellent quality equipment?" Fong Bujue mumbled to himself. His excitement only lasted for a few seconds. Then, his face suddenly returned to normal. This guy's mood changes were like a light switch. He could calm down just like that, and it only took a split second. "Wait a minute," Fong Bujue mumbled. "Could it be?" He looked at the item description again, and his eyes stopped at the last paragraph of the remark. "Labeled as trash and locked in the storage room." In other words, the quality and function of this thing are filled in by the victims of the Wizards Association, but the real quality is unknown. He speculated in his mind. With that thought in mind, his suicidal behavior began. I should know after giving it a try. With that thought in mind, Fong Bujue started to examine his equipment. As long as I throw in 3 items that are above excellent quality, I'll have a chance to get a legendary equipment. Currently, Fong Bujue believed that the most useless item that he had was the stool of the 18 bronze statues, number 5. This item that did not have any equipment requirement might be useful in a low-level PK, but once his level increased, using it to hit someone was not as effective as using his bare hands. Unfortunately, the equipment's quality was broken, and it did not meet the requirement to activate the disintegrator's special effect. After 2 minutes of consideration, Fong Bujue finally chose 3 pieces of equipment: Persephone's vacuum cleaner, spiderweb gloves, and Goblin's gas mask. With the increase in level, the rhythm of the players' battles became faster, and the battles became more complicated and intense. Therefore, the usability and usefulness of these 3 items appeared to be lacking. Mario's wrench and Jazz shoes were both excellent equipment that he had obtained at a low level, but they were much better. The former had the characteristics of a tool and could be used together with a not-so-hasty repair. The latter's passive effect was even more outstanding and reliable. Is this how it should be used? Feng Bujue placed the pulverizer on the ground and placed the largest vacuum cleaner on the conveyor belt. Important note: your operation is irreversible. Are you sure you want to do this? A system notification and a pop-up window popped up. Feng Bujue clicked confirm, and the vacuum cleaner was fixed on the conveyor belt of the machine. He did the same for the next 2 pieces of equipment. Half a minute later, the 3 pieces of equipment were lined up in a row on the conveyor belt. Brother Ju didn't hesitate and pulled the lever next to the machine. Kuchi kuchi, a strange sound came from the machine, and the teleportation started. The 3 pieces of equipment were suddenly animated. When they entered the machine from the conveyor belt, it was as if they were squeezed into the machine, and there was even a sound effect of squeak. 10 seconds later, when the 3 pieces of equipment were all in the machine, it started to vibrate and squeak like a malfunctioning engine. Purple smoke came out from the gap. No matter how one looked at it, this magical disintegrator zero gave off a very unreliable feeling. Moments later, the convex lens on the other side of the machine lit up, and a conical beam shot out. A ball of white light took shape and condensed into an item. Name: emaciated residue. A type: others. Quality: trash. Special effect: none. Remark: material residue that has lost its characteristics. Pure trash. It cannot be used in any way. Feng Bujue picked up the piece of residue and used 2 seconds to read the item description. Then, he silently and quickly destroyed it. Another 5 seconds later, he suddenly got up and took out a stool from his inventory and slammed it on the fan machine in front of him. Go to hell. Die, 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 die. He roared as he slammed the machine, venting his anger. As the saying goes, 3 chicken ribs are better than a chicken steak. The 3 pieces of equipment were excellent quality. They could be sold for a few coins at the auction house, but now they were all gone. Hint: the creation of a legendary item has failed, the energy of the item you inserted has been absorbed, the success rate of the next creation will be slightly higher. The system notification brought Brother Ju back to his senses. He let out a long sigh, picked up the accordion-sized machine, and placed it in the corner of the storage room. A man who is never content is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Feng Bujue sighed, based on the mentality of a gambler, for the sake of legendary equipment. I think I will put in more items in the future. He knew his own weakness very well, but I can use the extra rewards to draw equipment anyway. It's just a few less experience points. In the future, if I get any good stuff that's above excellent quality, I'll keep it first, and when I get 3 or more, I'll put them in. As long as I keep accumulating, no matter how bad my luck is, from a probability perspective, I will be able to create legendary equipment sooner or later. With that thought in mind, Brother Ju felt a little better. But he didn't know how terrifying the magical disintegrator zero was. The initial success rate of this thing was actually only 0.1%, and the cumulative failure rate was calculated according to 1% of a piece of equipment, regardless of whether it was excellent, perfect, or legendary. In other words, the first time it was made, there was only a 1 in 10,000 chance of success. Even after he put in 3 pieces of equipment, the success rate of the second attempt was only 3.1%. If he used 4 pieces of equipment and failed again, the third attempt would increase to 7.1%. Of course, these were all hidden characteristics, and the players would not know about them. Only the game company would be able to see these statistics through the system. Okay, let's go to the market first. Feng Bujue collected his reward in the storage room and prepared to go to the market. Because this server was in sleep mode, and he logged in 10 minutes earlier than the agreed time, he had an extra 100 minutes to do other things. It could be said that it was very leisurely. Therefore, he returned to the elevator. After the elevator door closed, he pressed the button for the market and arrived at the bustling open space. As mentioned earlier, Thriller Paradise's market was set up with multiple mirror spaces. In other words, the game had n identical markets, and they were separated by number to divide the player's population. Back then, Brother Jew and Passing Rain had randomly decided on the number 10, so the people from Underworld Frontline would lock the entrance to the market at Area 10 in the login lobby. Coincidentally, at this time of the morning, there were quite a number of Brother Jew's acquaintances in Area 10. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.